Welcome to the regular council meeting of Township of Whitewater Region for March 2nd, 2022 at 4:53 p.m. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for the many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Stanford Prayer, please. Almighty God, we give thanks for the great blessings which have been bestowed on Canada and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. Guide us in our deliberations as township councillors and strengthen us in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. Grant us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to preserve the blessings of this country for the benefit of all and to make good laws and wise decisions. Amen. So at this time, item number 3, I would ask if there's any disclosure of interest for this evening. Seeing none, thank you. Now we'll move on to public meetings, 4.1, zoning bylaw amendment. Recommendation of the Township of the Council of Whitewater Region 1, approve an amendment to the zoning category of the property described as Part Lot 5, Westmeath Concession 6, EML, Government Road.
This is microphone working.
It's green.
It's not. It's not like going through the system. No.
Okay. So are we going live?
No, yeah, we're live. We're good.
Okay, so you can hear me?
It's just in the room.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start over. To the Township of Whitewater Region 1, approve an amendment to the zoning category of the property described as part of Lot 5, Westmeath Concession 6, EML, Government Road from Rural RU Zone to Rural Exception 32 Zone, and 2, authorize the Mayor and the Clerk to execute a development agreement with Seth Ains Ashworth to implement the recommendation of the Aggregate Impact Assessment. Motion and a seconder, please. Councillor Olmsted and Councillor Mackay. Thank you. And this goes to Ivan.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll start just by reading a quick planner statement pertaining to the public meeting that's before us for the zoning applications. So if a person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Whitewater Region before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Under Section 3411 of the Plan Act, if council decides to refuse an application or refuses to or neglects to make a decision on an application within 120 days of the municipal clerk receiving the application, the applicant or the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing may appeal to the tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk of the municipality. Under Section 3419 of the Plan Act, it states that not later than 20 days after giving notice of passing of the bylaw, the applicant, any person or public body who made written or oral submissions at the public meeting to council before the bylaw was passed may appeal to the Ontario Lands Tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk of the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Government Road, the address for the zoning. Sorry. This is for Government Road. The address for the zoning amendment is Part Lot 5, Concession 6, EML Government Road. Will staff please give an overview of the application?
Yeah, thanks so much. So the present application is submitted by Seth Ashworth. He's the owner of the property located at 1223 Government Road. Essentially, his property is currently zoned rural, which allows for residential use or a single-family home. However, due to the proximity to the adjacent licensed aggregate or licensed pit, and also the extractive industrial reserve zone, there's a minimum separation distance from his future house to the pit, or that zoning category, if you will, of 150 meters. So in order to reduce the 150 meters, he's filed the application for the zoning amendment to reduce from 150 to 40 meters. The applicant filed an aggregate impact assessment, so he hired a company to assess what the impact of this new house would be on the pit, and also what impact the pit could have on the house. And the report concluded that subject to certain recommendations, there should be no impacts to either the pit or his dwelling. So those recommendations include a certain type of well or well casing, positioning of the house furthest away from the pit, noise-resistant windows, and notice on title. So that's the purpose of the development agreement. That's the second item of this report. So it will implement the recommendations from the aggregate impact assessment. So staff are supportive of this. There is, in fact, there's an existing single-family home between Mr. Ashworth's lot and the pit. So there's an existing home between the two. So the impacts to the pit already exist as a result of that existing adjacent dwelling. So yeah, staff are supportive, and we're looking for council consideration on this matter. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone present that would like to speak?
No.
No, there's no one present. Okay. So I understand no one has registered to speak. Comments will be reviewed. So we go to a vote. And the motion is that the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute a development agreement with Seth Ashworth to implement the recommendation of the aggregate impact assessment. We have a mover and a seconder. We'll have a vote. All in favor?
No questions.
No questions. We're going to questions. Okay. Sorry. Councillor Mackay.
Is that pit still in use?
Yeah, I believe it is still being used by the owner for, I think, septics and the likes. So
Okay.
yes, it is still an existing licensed pit.
Okay. Did they have any problem with it?
They haven't commented as a result of my notice that they would have received in the mail.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now, the next one is 4.2, and the next zoning amendment, which is 4.2, for the property located at 214 Synton Street, has been withdrawn by the applicant. So we will not be acting on that one this evening. Now, we move on to 4.3. Cobden Area Agricultural Stormwater Assessment. Recommendation that the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region 1 receive the Cobden Area Agricultural Stormwater Assessment Draft Final Report prepared by JP2G Consultants, Inc. as a guiding document, and 2, direct the staff to incorporate any action items into existing 2022 departmental work plan initiatives and report back as necessary. Motion and a seconder, please. Councillor Mackay and Councillor Nicholson, sorry. And this goes to Ivan?
Yeah, maybe I'll just start by providing an introduction of the two guests we have with us. So we do have the consultants that worked on this project. So first off, we have Brent Parsons. He's the Principal and Senior Aquatic Scientist with Hutchinson Environmental Sciences. Hutchinson was the lead on this project, and their office is based out of Bracebridge. And as a sub-consultant, we have Brian Whitehead with us. Council may be familiar with Brian. He's a professional planner with the company of JP2G Consultants. and he works out of the Pembroke office. So he's a principal, and he manages the planning services. Just one thing to note, this project was funded by the province. If I recall correctly, it was in the range of about $70,000 we received from the province to support this project. And further, this project has been prepared with the support of the Muskrat Watershed Council, so they have been we have corresponded with them with respect to the project. So I'll just transfer it over to the consultants. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Brian, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Moore, members of council, staff. I'd like to take this opportunity to elaborate a bit on the project team. We're pleased to join. We were pleased that Hutchinson Environmental called us on this assignment there, as I mentioned earlier. Bringing persons to this project, making some introductory comments, and we're going to make a joint presentation. But this project is very interesting because it's a combination of science, engineering, and planning, and community involvement. Brent will handle the science piece. The engineering and public consultation was handled by our firm, and I was joined in that process by Andrea Bishop, who's an environmental engineer with our firm, and Stephen Aarons, who's in charge of our surface drainage engineering program out of our Ottawa office. And of course, I worked on the public consultation and the action plan and the implementation plan. So, as I mentioned, Brent will handle the science piece, and I'll give some more detail on the public consultation. So maybe if you could turn it to the next slide, or we do actually have a presentation. Maybe we should bring it up on the screen. I don't know if you have it. No.
Which presentation? Do you want the extended one or the small one?
The small one.
Just okay. You can't see it though, can you? Yeah, he wants the first one.
I don't have it. Show me it's what you were showing.
It's what you were showing,
just
yeah,
use
the
whatever
first
you
one.
do.
Can it be transferred to Zoom so he can see it?
Well, can we make him co-host?
No, just, I'll shoot the monitor for the live stream, you just take care of what you have to take care of.
Okay,
So he's good. It's good.
Sean's going to fix it up. Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, Sean or Brian, we're on the first page. Cobden, can you see it there?
I can, thank you.
Okay, good.
Well, that covers my introduction piece on the first slide, and then the second slide. Basically the study purpose is to identify priority areas for the implementation of best management practices, or as known as BMPs, to reduce nutrient loading to Muskrat Lake and provincially significant wetlands. And secondly, to recommend best management practices best suited for the implementation within priority areas based on input from farmers and property owners. And just so people know, best management practices is they come in three categories. There's in-pipe solutions that would include features like wetlands or wet or dry ponds or plunge pools. There's conveyance treatment type solutions involving vegetated buffers, berms, field contouring, or what's I've learned now is called flow spreaders, which is a form of berm directing the surface drainage away from water courses. And then there's at-source types of best management practices that include tile drains and soakaway pits and the like. And we also touched on agricultural treatment, things like cattle fencing, manure storage, and cover crops as well. Just a brief overview of what the type of best management practices. There's quite a long list of them in the report. That's just sort of a very, very high level piece. So what I'd like to do is maybe turn it over to Brent, and maybe he can explain some of the science and that's gone into this project and how the priority areas were developed and prioritized. Brent?
Thanks, Brian, and good evening, everyone. Next slide, please. Perfect, yeah, that's the one. So, the Muskrat Lake watershed has been made.
Excuse me, Brent, can you turn your video off? We're not getting your audio. No, we're still not getting you. Can you speak now, Brent? No, okay, go ahead, try it again.
Okay. It's been an interesting project because the Muskrat watershed has been really well as a water quality scientist. There's lots of data to use that need to be reinvented, to be utilized for this project. And the way that we went about using that was to define priority areas. So, you know, our study area was the Muskrat Lake watershed within of the township of Whitewater region, but we wanted to define some priority areas. We would, you know, start to talk to individual farmers and complete one-on-one consultation. To define those, we first looked at where were the nutrient source areas, and defined that as where are the highest nutrient concentrations in streams. And there's a really good set from there were monthly samples were collected from 2014 to 2019. I leaned on where highest phosphorus, which is one of the nutrients we look at, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So that's what the tables refer to the bottom right. And we found that the highest concentrations were at 2, which is on the snake. So once found, once we looked at water quality, we also looked at, you know, where is there a lot of agricultural land? Concentrations.
Okay, sorry, we're losing you and we can't make out what you're saying right now. So, Brian, can you take over for a bit? Brian, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Caught myself. That was my best part of my speech right there. But I'll do my best, Mayor Moore. What Brent was saying is and I think before I get into that, Hutchinson Environmental are probably one of the leading firms in Ontario for this type of study. When we were embarking on this project, I asked Brent, like, how many firms are there out there that do water quality monitoring, or not monitoring, modeling? And he says, well, we're probably the only ones. But so I think that they bring a lot of credibility to the project. But what they did was the study area looked at the two wetlands, the two inflows of the Muskrat River and the Snake River and the associated wetlands. And what Brent did was he was trying to explain was in that map you're looking at, they reviewed a lot of the science that's already available, and there's a lot of science available because of the Muskrat Watershed Council's work that has been done on water quality monitoring between 2014 and 2019. There's just a whole wealth of information there. So the study area was not the entire Muskrat watershed. It was limited to Whitewater region. And of the two sub-watersheds, Muskrat and Snake, it was concluded that the Snake was the priority area because there was more agricultural land use, and then there's also higher concentrations. In particular, there were three priority areas identified, and the first one is known as the area, it's called technically Area SC02, and that's a monitoring station it's part of the monitoring program that the Watershed Council did. And it's associated with a water course called the Unnamed Creek. And there's some data down there about that, and I don't pretend to fully understand it all, but it does indicate that there is a lot of nutrient loading from the Unnamed Creek that flows under the Snake River line and into the wetland and then into the Snake River. So and that sub watershed is about 1/3 of the entire watershed. About 2/3 of it goes into the adjacent Bromley Township, Radness and Bromley, but in the Bromley portion. And so that's how that area came about. Then there was the second area that was identified as priority, the areas that were flooded. We had a database available to us from the 2019 flood that was prepared by NAV Canada, and we used that as a basis of information for identifying areas that were subject to spring flooding. And the first cut at it, there was some problems with it, but with the help of some local residents, we were able to redefine that area as part of the consultation program. And there was another area that was identified as a priority. And then the third area was defined as the called the riparian areas along the lake, essentially farmlands adjacent to Muskrat Lake was the third area. So if we could go to the next slide. And then what we did after that was we took the science piece and within those priority areas, and then we use those areas and for circulating our requests or invitations to everybody within that defined priority study area to attend a public meeting. And we had that meeting on December 8th. And there was about a dozen members of the public and different agencies attended. We had an agency contact list that was informed, including non-government like the Watershed Council and the Muskrat Lake Council, all provincial agencies and other NGOs, non-government organizations. So we had a combination of non-government organizations and some farmers, property owners in the study area. Also attended, and we had a virtual public meeting, and the questions were quite good, and so that sort of set up the framework for individual meetings the following day, which was the 9th of December. But what we did is we had those small group interviews in the basement of the municipal building, and there was myself, Andrea Bishop and Stephen Ahrens there, and Ivan was there as well, and we found that they were extremely productive. We had about 9 or 10 individual and small group meetings with property owners. And even though it was only 9 or 10, when you add up all the land that those property owners owned, we estimate that it was almost 50% of the property or the study area. There was some property owners that had several hundred acres of land. So it covered a lot of territory. And what we would do is we spoke individually about their individual circumstances, and as well as the the types of best management practices that would be most suited to their properties. We found that the input was very good. It gave us an opportunity to look at solutions for best management practices that were easy to implement, that actually benefited the farmers in terms of nutrient loss. It's in the best interest of the farming community to not have their fertilizers spread off the property for full wash off the property. So in this case, the SCO2 area that we're looking at mostly on this air photograph is that unnamed creek. And what we were able to do based on the consultations with the property owners is to redefine or refine the study areas. So we refined study area SCO2 to include lands on both sides of the unnamed creek, going up from the Snake River line all the way up to the township's limit along Snake River line as it goes into Bromley there. And along that water course, there's opportunities for what we call flow spreaders or berms, and they're easy to build, and they can direct the water, surface water, so they're not flowing directly into the stream. and that any nutrients can settle adjacent to the berm and potentially over a period of years even be collected and redistributed on the farm. So we spoke to a couple of farmers about that, and it was well received. And then in particular, where there's a yellow circle up at the top left-hand corner, that there's an outlet there, and there's a farmer by the name of Harrison, who's from Southern Ontario, the Newmarket area, and he's in the process. He has quite a lot of holdings down there, and he's moving up here. He's bought in recent years. And one thing I should add about this area, this is quite a lot of tile drainage that's been going on upstream and as well as on the Harrison property. So there's been some works done at that outlet, and we see an opportunity for an end what do you call it, an end source solution there in the form of some kind of a pond or a wetland that could provide some measure of both surface treatment and or water quality and water quantity treatment at that location. And Mr. Harrison is actually quite receptive to that, and we had a follow-up meeting with Mr. Harrison a couple of weeks ago just to confirm that he would be interested in maybe working with the township on partnering on opportunities that might, for funding that might be directed for those types of solutions. Because of the tile drainage, there's been quite a lot of additional flow in the springtime. There was a property owner on the other side that was of Snake River Line was concerned about the water flows increasing and affecting their ability to put crops in the springtime. So this could potentially be a win-win. And some of the other ideas that aren't really shown on this graphic, but are also applicable to the flood areas, include the berms and the vegetative buffers along the shorelines and things like that as well. So we found that these particular interviews were extremely useful. The farming community was very receptive to the ideas from our engineering staff, and we saw this as sort of a very good way of conducting this type of study in a focused environment and coming up with shortlisted BMP or best management practices and solutions that would be beneficial to the farmers and the environment. So I don't know, maybe the next slide. Yeah, and then we came up with some action plan items here based on the solutions that we came up with. And first, I mean, the first item is basically standard. It's like, let people know that the study's completed and post it on your website. The second item is a lot more important because it's more of a communication plan. And because this study doesn't have to end here. There's been established contacts with some existing property owners in the area. There's an opportunity to provide them with additional information in the form of we've drafted a brochure, and hopefully you have it to look at. And that's just a draft. We can revise that based on any comments that staff and council have, but it can provide information and contact to keep the interest going if it's there, and provide information. And if there's additional property owners and word gets around that they would like to have a site meeting to talk about how these best management practices could apply to their property, there's those opportunities as well. And those property owners could be added to a list. And that would provide a segue into item 3, which is ongoing monitoring of funding applications to implement some of these priorities, because really what you've got with this study is a solid piece of science backed up with community input and partnerships with the public and non-government organizations like the Lake Council and the Watershed Council. And it's one of these opportunities where if everybody is sort of on the same page, your opportunity for funding is a lot greater. So we see opportunities for that. And the township also has some, in item 4, you have your existing community improvement plan that does have some initiatives for environmental improvement like septic systems and some farming initiatives now. we would recommend that you perhaps expand that to include some of the best management practices that are associated with this study. Finally, although this study was simply a smaller study area in terms of the whole watershed, we do see it as an opportunity or a good model that could be applied to other parts of the watershed, because I think that the farming community is generally willing to talk, particularly if there's some benefit to them, and that's really what it's going to take to make a difference in the watershed moving forward, in my opinion, anyway. So yeah, the results of this study can be reviewed with neighboring municipalities and other levels of government, and encouraging them to adopt the Whitewater region solution for best management practices moving forward. Should say one final thing. I mean, this won't necessarily solve Muskrat Lake, but in the big picture, what it does is provide an indication to higher levels of government that people are working together toward a common solution. There is some interest with the Lake Association to ultimately have more restrictions and more like a final solution to the water quality problem in the lake. But I think at least in this early stage, we're still in an early stage in the evolution of dealing with this problem. This report is more oriented to the best management and working together towards solutions. And the more we can do that within a wider context, the better opportunity there is to coming up for the big fix solution at a later date. That's my presentation. I'll be available for any questions or.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any questions from council members? Councillor Nicholson?
No, a very detailed report. Thank you so much, both you and your team, Brian and Brent. Unfortunately, without the communications, we didn't have the opportunity to hear him speak too, but maybe there'll be another time. I just wanted a couple thoughts here. The first one is just from an agricultural-based initiative. Does OMAFRA or the farm unions, is there interest, funding, is there efforts on their part to also want to control the flow of fertilizers, for example, away and into the watershed? Is there any opportunities for us to partner with those organizations?
I can try and answer that, or maybe, I don't know if Ivan wants to answer it, but I do have some experience with the watershed on the Watershed Council, and I do know that when I was on the Science Committee, that there was representation or technical support from the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ag and Food, and the Ministry of the Environment at all our science meetings. It's not as, I know that there's money out there for these types of initiatives. All you have to do is look at Lake Erie, and see all the money that goes down there, or Lake Simcoe. This is a miniature version of those situations. And the irony is that it's probably easier to fix a smaller situation where there aren't any inter-county or inter-provincial or international jurisdictions. So I hope that helps your question. As long as we can, personally, if we can all, I think what the higher level governments want to see is everybody on the same page, an agreement. And I think with this report, we sort of have one step in the right direction.
And that's perfect. We've had a couple of delegations with parliamentary assistant, I think, CEO of MOE, and she was a big part of the efforts, I think, in Lake Simcoe. Is that right? Yeah. And this is the same recommendation she gave us: is you got to start off with some small steps, gain some momentum, find the partnerships, and then exploit them. That puts pressure on the government to invest in the problem. So I think it's a great first step, and I'm glad that we've started that. Which leads me to my next question: the recommendation number 5, or action plan number 5. I'm really interested in your thoughts on this one, and yeah, I'm putting you in the hot seat. How do we engage with our neighboring municipalities? I mean, there's no conservation authority We're all doing our own thing within our boundaries, but watersheds don't know boundaries. So what are your thoughts on how do we act on recommendation number 5? And what kind of efforts do you see us trying to do first?
Well, that's a great question. Because a lot of times there's a tendency to say it's not our responsibility, or it's somebody else's responsibility, or it's a higher level of government that should be involved. And then it just goes in circles. And the answer is that it's everybody's responsibility. And when all I can really say is I think a lot of these discussions have to occur at one-on-one and small group levels. And like the other part of it is when I was involved, and I'm just speaking for myself, but when I was involved with the Watershed Council, what we would do is have updates to the other municipalities on the initiatives that are being done, and just keep the dialogue going. But it's so hard for the Lake Association and the Watershed Council to do that over time because of the lack of internal supports for the organization. It's very, very challenging. But I think it's all communication. It's going out to these municipalities and letting them know the study's done, letting them know that it's a process that seems to work. And in this case, there was buy-in, and we think it might work in other parts of the watershed. And if there's opportunities for partnering with them, I think that's what's needed.
Thank you. I just would ask that, to me, the how part of 5 is something that the staff are really going to have to work hard to try to dig up. I believe it's advocacy, and it's interesting that you said it's the council, it's the Watershed Council, but I also think we as the leaders have a responsibility too to advocate, and not just with MOE, but with our neighboring municipalities in the county. Maybe it's not trying to force their hand to do something, but it's sharing the updates, trying to get them engaged and become participants in this effort. Anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
I'm going to get in trouble when I say this, but as you go over the hill past Opeongo School, there's a provincial ditch, and there's no buffer. There's supposed to be a 50-foot buffer. And every time I say that, people get mad because they lose land, but it's not our job to stop that. That's the MOE's job. And a 50-foot buffer could be hay, could be anything, or you could put trees. You could do anything to protect that runoff into them ditches of fertilizer, and the environment should be doing it, not us. They should be going, because when that whole valley where it drains, that land was worth nothing, and you could never get on it till late June. And with the ditch in there, it made a difference to everybody's farm. But you can't say it now. You're almost. I might be stoned when I get out of here. I'm not sure. But somebody should do something about that. MOE should be on that, not us. Because that's the law when you make a provincial ditch. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Yeah, Brian, in your presentation, you said 1/3 of the
Name Creek.
in the unknown creek. 1/3 of the runoff or the fertilizer that's going. It's 1/3 of the contamination that's going into the Snake River. Is that correct? Am I?
Well, just for clarification, if I may, it's the area of that sub-watershed, the area that drains into the unnamed creek. It's
in Whitewater region, Brian?
About 1/3 of it is in Whitewater, 2/3 of it's in Bromley.
Okay.
So it's a larger area. It extends beyond. So it flows from Bromley into Whitewater.
Okay, what you call the unknown creek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unnamed.
So that's the name of it. But yeah. Okay. Now I'm kind of gathering a bit of it, because furthering to what Councillor Mackay is talking about is I drove a lot of out around the bar line area, and those open ditches go pretty nearly right from Highway 60 come this way, and draining all that water on all that land. And we have no jurisdiction in that. And somehow we need to, you're right, we need to talk with our neighboring municipalities and get somebody to help do something, because I feel that an awful lot of it is, much as I really thought your study is great, and it's brought a lot forward, and with that part, maybe we can get some more input and some more studies done and further, and see if we can't get better management practice put into practice, because a lot of it, and I've been around for a long time, and everybody says, well, it's not in our municipality, and that's not fair. That's, if we're going to solve this problem, we all have to work as a team. I think that's where I'm coming from. But like you say, you got to start somewhere. Here's the start. It's a start. We can take it to someplace and say, this is what we've done, and but we need some more help. Really need help, and I don't know where to get the help. And I know Councillor Nicholson's going, I know. We just need help. It's but nothing against you. Your team did a great job. Somehow we need to move it further, get more people involved, and try and solve this. And it's not putting one blame on anybody. We've got to work as a team and solve the problem. And that's about where I come from. But I couldn't figure out, I was thinking 1/3 of it was all from when you say the unknown creek and it flows further than Whitewater region, it flows way up into Brumley Town. I'll call it Brumley because I go back just about as far as you do. Okay. And I heard you refer to it as the town line, not the Snake River line. So, okay, just those comments, but that's just joking. I think if now that I have in my head that it goes further up, then I understand where your presentation's coming from. It was well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I do have one comment, and I don't know who's going to answer this, but I see item bullet number 3 was provincial and federal funding. So if we were to do this starting every year, that'll give us a base of figures to work on. Am I correct on that?
Like to do a study like this every year?
Yeah, if the funding was there, if we have to know how things are going, would we not have to do more than one study?
Well, what we're finding is that working within these defined sub-watersheds provides us an opportunity to deal more directly with property owners in this case study. There's no reason why the areas couldn't be enlarged, but now that we've sort of been through it once, we might be able to manage a larger area, or even the whole watershed for that matter, using this approach, depending on what funding is available and what partnerships could be obtained. So if the adjacent, I guess when you're talking adjacent municipalities, it's mostly Admas and Bromley and North Laguna Wilberforce, and a little bit of Laurentian Valley, and I suppose even it flows out to Pembroke, but I think that's sort of at the fringe. So you're not dealing with a whole bunch of municipalities, and then there's county, and that's probably a bigger challenge as well.
Okay. Understand. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you to Brian and Brent for your presentation. I appreciate it, and it was quite an in-depth report. So thank you for your hard work. Thank you. Okay, before we move on, then we need a motion to accept. All in favor? We had a motion to, okay. Carried, thank you. Now we move on to number 5, announcements. Reeve Regier, please.
I don't have anything at this time. I was kind of preoccupied for the last couple of days, so I will have something moving forward for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Olmsted?
I'm the same. I've got nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin?
No, I have nothing at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay?
We had an election at the Beachburg Fair, and the exceptional president is re-elected, Dave Mackay.
Was it a tight
Derek
race?
Robinson's vice president, and Kirk Keller is second vice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good news. Thank you. Councillor Jackson?
Well, congratulations to that, Mr. President.
didn't cost you money to do it.
Okay, I have nothing further.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson?
Yeah, I do have one, and I sent an email, and I can't find it right now in this last minute, but I sent an email out to council. This week is the Cancer Care Campaign for the Pembroke Regional Hospital, an effort to upgrade our facilities so that we can get treatment closer to home for our residents. And I am soliciting councillors, Mayor, the Reeve, for a contribution that we could submit on behalf of the Township of Whitewater region towards the campaign. We are advertised as, I don't want to say corporate sponsor, but recognized as an organization supporting their drive, and I would like to put a dollar figure beside that support. So if you would like to consider that, and just let me know the amount so I can pass it on, and we'll get Sean to transfer a check once you guys have confirmed how much you'd like to donate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. We have, I guess, 2 weeks to work on that because Sean is away on vacation.
Yeah, if you just send an email, that can be coordinated.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
No, sorry, the campaign is officially tomorrow.
Oh, it's
So
officially tomorrow?
The check can go in 2 weeks, that's fine. But if you can let me know an amount so I can pass it on to them, they can report it tomorrow as
Okay.
part of the campaign. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have one thing. Whitewater seniors are having a lunch and social on March 7th from 11 till 1, and it's a soup and sandwich. And it's at 1765 Beachburg Road, which is the old Scotia Bank building. To register, please call 582, well, actually 1-833-582-7004 to register if you would like to attend. And that's all I have on that. And they are going to do this around the next couple of months around the Township of Whitewater region at different locations. So this is the first one. So if you attend the first one, you should find out then what the dates or possible dates are for the next ones coming up. So thank you to Amanda for that. And that's all I have for announcements. Thank you. Yeah, but that's further on. Okay, further on in our correspondence, we did have, the fire department got a grant from Enbridge Gas, and it was released this afternoon on Facebook. Jonathan and I stood by for pictures yesterday, and for the life of me, I can't remember the amount. I can't. I don't know what was discussed there, so thank you to that. And this is the second one we've had from Enbridge. I think we'd won 5 years ago, and this is for gas alarm, gas detectors, etc., and all that stuff that is very important for safety to life. Okay, so thank you. Now we'll move on to reports. Here is 6.1 for the one that's been, we're going to work on this one. Okay. We're working on 6.1, which is liquor establishment 214 Synton Street. Recommendation that the Council of the Township of Whitewater region support the winery retail store endorsement and the by the glass endorsement of Whitewater O'Brien Winery and Vineyard located at 214 Synton Street, subject to the necessary planning approvals, including zoning and site plan control. Motion and a seconder, please. Councillor Mackay and Councillor Jackson, thank you. And this goes to Rob, please. Carmen, sorry.
So
I know that we did decide to, or they pulled their application for zoning, but staff's still recommending that we endorse the winery retail store endorsement and the buy the glass endorsement once the approvals for the site plan and the zonings do go through. So if you have any questions, if you pass the recommendation, I'll just hold it until we get the zonings through. But then we have it dealt with.
Okay, so any questions at this time? Councillor Mackay.
Where's Simpson Street?
It's by the Westmeath boat launch.
Oh.
Yeah, it's way down by the, no, it's way down at the Westmeath boat launch.
Okay.
So there's a lone house down there on the right. That's the property there. I guess at one time it was probably a farm, I'm not sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Now we move on to 6.2, proposed council remuneration. Recommendation that the Council of Township of Whitewater Region approve the purposes of a public meeting minor change to council remuneration for the 2022 and to 2026 term. Motion and a seconder, please. Councillor Mackay and Councillor Nicholson. And this goes to Rob, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Per the Municipal Act, councils are obligated to review council remuneration at a public meeting once per the term of council. And with the changes to the deputy mayor position and the reeve for the next term of council, it was pretty important that we look at that. So what we're doing here is kind of setting it so as nominations open in May and people are running for council for the next term of council, they know what remuneration will look like. So we called upon three former people that were involved in municipal government, either as elected council or staff, to help us on our review. We collated some information that are contained in the appendixes from other municipalities. And generally, the review panel, who are there just to kind of be a sounding board, found that council remuneration was generally in the ballpark. And there's only slight changes. So one, there's a recommended change for cost of living for 2023. And you'll see the bylaw, they looked at 1.5 or 2. What I included in the draft bylaw was the 2%. And then they felt that the deputy mayor should be found halfway between the councillors and the mayor in terms of determining a salary for the deputy mayor, understanding that that's a changing role. In keeping with that, just the expense allowance is just slightly changed with the expectation that the mayor would attend more events, and so 1,000 for the mayor, 750 for the deputy mayor, and 500 remaining for the councillors. And then based on the ability to get a hold, like the importance of the council role in terms of connecting with residents, that it be made available that councillors might have access to the corporate cell plan. And we negotiated really low to about $21 a month. So that would ensure that council members, should they wish to participate, they be able to participate in that. So with regard to the rest, mileage, the annual cost of living adjustment, conferences and education, the meal allowance, no change. And there's also no proposed change to adding benefits or pensions. So those would continue to not be provided. You'll see in the schedule, different municipalities might have per diems, might have a lower salary, and then every meeting people go to, they get an additional amount. That is an administrative burden and also can be complicated to administer. Generally speaking, other than council's 2 meetings a month, the other committees would meet kind of monthly or there. So Muskrat Watershed Council, the Library Board, Committee of Adjustment, those all meet monthly and generally speaking are spread around, and the mayor recommends appointments to those. So it was felt that if those are spread around as they should be, that the burden for those extra meetings should be shared, and that one annual salary was fine and should continue. So the goal is to just kind of get council to endorse these proposed changes and to have the public meeting at the next meeting and pass the bylaw, and these changes would take effect for the next term of council. So any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Questions? Councillor McLaughlin.
I think I spoke with Rob over this one. It's the Committee of Adjustment. I think there should be some compensation for sitting on that committee, because it meets at least once per month. Though I feel that as far as the cell phones go, I really personally, it's preference, I guess, and I don't see, personally, I really don't want one at all. But if, because I count up some of my number of meetings, because I also sit on the airport commission and that, and there's a pile of meetings. Now, if you're going to share them, and if you're going to do committee of adjustment, maybe we have to rotate every year or a year and a half, 2 years, 2 years on, 2 years off. It's a big burden. We brought a lot of extra, and maybe Ivan could allude to that. There's a lot of extra income that's come from Whitewater region because we have, we're now doing our own severances. And with that is the one thing I see, and not saying I haven't even made up my mind. So maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but whoever sits on that, it's a big job. And if we have to come to the township, it takes another number of hours out of your time, and you're getting no extra compensation. So other than that, I personally don't care. I haven't got any more comments.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson?
Just a couple of things. I guess I'm just kind of wondering why the increase in expense allowance for the mayor and the deputy mayor, and as well why the increase in salary for the deputy mayor, where the reeve was always paid the same amount as the councillors before, and why we're providing cell phones to all, and is that cost being reported in the remuneration report to council? That needs to go every year. And I agree with Councillor McLaughlin with regards to the Committee of Adjustment. Before we took over severances and everything else, there might have been 1 or 2 meetings, 3, 4 a year sort of thing. And it was sitting around the council table prior to a council meeting. It wasn't a separate day, a separate meeting on a non-council day. Certainly, Whitewater Region has had a lot of development and has required a lot of attention of that committee meetings, committee itself for different meetings. And I also agree that it should be rotated as much as possible once a year, because you do have to set that Committee of Adjustment composition once a year. It's not once per term, it's once per year. Am I correct in saying that? Or at least we do that. I've always seen that done every other municipality. So I think that needs to be done. I mean, obviously some people wouldn't be able to sit on it because of work or whatever, especially if those meetings are during the day. But what happens is if you have those same people controlling the development over time, that's not good for the municipality either. I mean, it's good and it's bad. I don't want to say it's not good, but it becomes, I think it could become an issue over time, and that's why I would suggest that it should be rotated more than once during a term. So my questions, Rob?
Sure. Yep. So the cell phones are reported on the statement of council remuneration, so it's reflected on the expenses. When we looked at the comparator for all the other municipalities, the mayors were getting more in terms of an expense allowance. So us and Laurentian Valley are at the lower end. In terms of the deputy mayor, the thought, is that they're the deputy mayor and they're to replace the mayor either at county council or at home. So they would be involved in a greater number of meetings than the other members of council, and there'd be a greater expectation for them to attend or represent the municipality. So that would be that. In terms of committee of adjustment, if it's the entirety of council serving as committee of adjustment, you have to do the bylaw annually. When it's a separately constituted one, you would do it. Our procedural bylaw says that we review appointments of council members at the halfway point. So it would be every 2 years. So every 2 years, there's an opportunity to shuffle around. So you're not, if somebody's on the museum and shifts over to the library. So we would have that rotation every 2 years. If you're looking for a per diem, looking at kind of the comparators, looks like about $125 a meeting seems to be what people would pay as a per diem. What I would suggest, though, is I think the Committee of Adjustment dealt with a backlog of severance applications, and Carmen we were talking earlier about it has slowed a little bit, and the duration of the meetings is about an hour once a month, and yes, there's reports to read. They have been meeting electronically quite effectively, so yes, it is a time commitment, but so is serving on the library board, the museum, the airport, the seniors task force, the recreation task force. So all these items are a time commitment. So the question is always about sharing the load equitably, but understanding that council can add in per diems should it wish. But there are a number of different entities that are meeting on a monthly basis that would require some level of time commitment. So that's basically what it was, is that when we were looking at the expense amount for the mayor, we're quite low compared to other municipalities generally. And it was just found that if with COVID opening up, if there are public events and golf tournaments and Civitan events, and that the mayor is expected to attend to on behalf of the municipality, that those come with expenses. And if the mayor is not able to go, then the deputy mayor would be going. So that's why that slight adjustment. But it was based on workload was why the half point was what the review panel looked at.
I guess just as a comment with regards to the expenses. So what happens in some municipalities with regards to their education and conferences, those types of things like golf tournaments or dinners kind of comes out of that funding. And then sometimes it comes out of their actual expenses, but I don't know that it's consistent throughout. And I mean, Whitewater region has been using that as council to be able to donate to different causes. I don't know how many councilors have actually used it as an expense allowance. So I don't know if that has to kind of change. I don't know. It's just because that's not what we've been doing. We've been using up our expense allowance for donations to certain causes, and that's the only thing I've been using it for. So I think everybody else, as far as I know, is using it the same way. So I don't know if that needs to be changed. Donation allowance, I don't know. And conferences and education, there are some of us that don't go at all. Some of us go more than others, which is fine, especially for new council members. I think it's important for them to get up to speed, and there's nowhere a better way than to go to a conference and education sessions for those councillors to get up to speed, speak to other municipalities, speak to other municipal councillors. I think it's a great way of letting them know how things are done in other municipalities as well as their own. I don't know if that expense allowance title, expense/donation allowance, I don't know.
So we clarified the policies. Sean did that work a couple of years ago, because I know we were trying to clarify what it can and can't be used for. So the conference education one speaks specifically to training, education, and professional development. And the expenses one does reference donations, and any other expense would require a submission of a receipt to be reimbursed. So the policy does allow for any kind of expense related to the duties that aren't education, and would allow you to donate any surplus funds. So, and if any of that is used, it's reported annually in the statement of council remuneration. So those policies have clarified those kind of two buckets as being miscellaneous expenses with a receipt and donations, and then on the other end, conference and education as professional development, conferences and training.
Yeah, and I guess with regards to the salary, other than this term, as I have said before, the Reeve really hasn't been involved in any of those extra meetings, and has this time around with the mayor. So yeah, I would agree that that needs to happen. However, is that going to continue on in the future, or is it going to go back to normal where the deputy mayor, which was the Reeve, really only participates at the county level and has limited participation like any other councillor at any other meetings? It's not very often that the Reeve has had to replace, or anybody else has had to replace, the mayor here at council and be the chair of the council meetings. It's very rare. It has been very rare for a number of years. But I agree, our Reeve today has certainly been more involved. And if that was going to be considered the deputy mayor as well, that they were going to continue to be more involved, then yes, I would agree that that salary increase should occur. But if not, are they going to sit on the emergency department? I mean, like, it's been kind of directed by the mayor, our mayor as it sits now, that the Reeve has been included and certainly has had a heavy load this term, but that isn't normal, is what I'm saying. And I don't know what's going to be normal moving forward, so I don't know if I'm comfortable bumping that position up 4,000 just because we've had an abnormal term.
If I may, I think the decision to have it as a separately elected position, specifically to be the backup for both the county and at home, then I think that's in keeping with kind of sharing the workload in terms of the leadership piece, understanding that the mayor is still the primary person, versus if you would have selected, whoever the council selects who they want as a backup, and just in case, I think as a separately created position, that would lend itself to the recommendation from the review panel. But again, that, to your point, after the election and the personalities involved and how they worked well together and all that point, but I think as a separately elected position, the likelihood is that person's going to, and with the mayor now serving double duty and going to the county, they will be called upon to share the load. But it's council's prerogative.
Rebrigger.
Well, thank you. I'm just going to go back a bit, and I'm going to go back, and Councillor McLaughlin will attest to this. I'm going back to 2010, where we had a mayor, a deputy mayor, and a Reeve. We had the three positions. And at that time, the deputy mayor did make, in addition to the Reeve did just went to county and was paid the same as a councillor, and that never did change. And that was going back to the council of the day, and it was a decision that was made by those gentlemen back in that day and time, which was fine. But I think moving forward, I kind of agree with the CAO. I think moving forward, I do see the deputy mayor position becoming a little more involved, especially with the mayor now going to county council. There will be, I think there will be an added workload put to that. Because of that. And I think, in the past 3 years sitting as the Reeve, I think, there has been an added workload, but I think it's a workload that I think all of us have kind of shared, because council is not what it used to be. There's a lot of work to it sometimes. And I know myself, when we're talking about different committees and whatnot, I know myself, I sat on the Human Resources Committee. Do you know how many times I sat, as Human Resources? Days and days that I was never compensated for, but when you're sitting on a committee like that, and you're hiring someone, it is a full 7-hour day, and it is what it is. So I think we all work together, kind of share the load together. And coming back to the Committee of Adjustment, if council decides that you want to pay a per diem for that, then I would be in agreement with that. But I would also be in agreement then that it has to be shared in 2 terms, so that everybody has that same opportunity. So that's where I sit with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Olmsted.
Yeah, I think my comments would be sometimes we're probably paid too much. Sometimes you'd probably do the job for nothing. And then you have weeks like this past week where you just can't pay us enough. And I know every member here probably has been paid enough this past week or two with what's next on the agenda. But anyway, I'm in full agreement with the proposal as it is. I sit on the Committee of Adjustment, and it's I know that I don't put in as many hours as some others, like the Reeve and some of these other committees. I do see the benefit of moving the deputy mayor to the role. I think that job's going to be a pretty full job coming up for the next 4 years. I think there's going to be a lot of support needed, especially the mayor attending county council. I think that's going to be a shared role, big time. So I'm pretty happy with the way it's written. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My turn? No, Councillor McLaughlin.
No, you're willing to go. You go ahead. My comment, and I agree with Committee of Adjustment. But it needs to be changed, rotated. That needs to happen. I don't think, as somebody said, it's probably better for the committee because everybody has different thoughts. And if we rotate it, then it's rotated and other people get their thoughts as well. So
Talking annual?
If there's not going, as long as we're going to rotate it or it's going to be rotated, I wouldn't have any problem with that at all. I can, because it's a big, but also like the Riva said, it's all a a lot of commitment. There's a lot of, and I'll echo what Councillor Olmsted said. There isn't enough money. I don't think
do it for the
in
money.
Whitewater region to deal with what we've had to deal with in the last few weeks as well. The only thing I have, and correct me, Rob, if I'm wrong, but I thought that it was your increase in salary was based on the cost of living. I thought it was going to be cost of living. This is not. This is stating what your increases are going to be in the next 3 years.
So this is to establish the starting point, and whatever cost of living adjustment you give to staff, it will be adjusted accordingly. So this year, as an example, staff got 1.5% for 2022, and council received 1.5%.
So is it going to keep going?
Yes, so what we would build in is the 2%, and should, as part of the 2023 budget, inflation is gross and ugly, and it's more than 2%, but at least for those running for council, they know that what the starting point is, and if it's adjusted. So yes, we would continue to make sure that it's adjusted annually based on the rest of the staff. And I should point out that most of the municipalities do that, so it's a best practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and thank you very, very much for the clarification, because I was thinking, because right now, if I go to the grocery store or go to the tank, fill up my car, cost of living's gone up drastically, and I'll stop at that.
Okay, my turn. If we're going to venture into changing things, Committee of Adjustment is 12 times a year. At least it's proven to be 12 times a year. Muskrat Watershed is 12 times a year. Libraries, 10 months. And museum is 4 times a year. It's monthly. So like if we're meeting one for monthly, we have
In the
to.
past times, it was 12 times.
But how do we make adjustments for one committee and not for the rest?
Good point.
You know?
Well, and I think it's been agreed around here that we rotate it all.
Yes,
and
but that was
if we
twice.
rotate it, then there's no problem.
But
So-
that was halfway through the term was a rotation. But now you're talking for committee of adjustment, you're talking annual, are you not?
No,
No, I think I suggested annually, but we have, at other municipalities, the council sits as the committee of adjustment, and as Rob stated, that if that's the case, they have to appoint annually. But because it's a separate, it's not specific to all of council, it can be longer. It could be the term of council, or it could be by, halfway through, and that's what we're doing. So that's fine.
The other thing I should just point out is that if people are feeling kind of burned out or like sometimes one committee is going through a lot and it's a lot of work, that if people want to kind of step away, then we can circulate and then replace them. So it allows us to do that. But we do it at the halfway mark. But just to say, if anybody wants to change, they can just let us know, and then we can see if somebody else wishes. Like, for instance, seniors about 9 months ago who needed additional help, and Reeve Rigger was added to the mix. But that, just like the Recreation Task Force is ending in April, so that will free up some people. But yeah, so the procedural bylaw now says halfway, which is 2 years, which I think gets people enough time to get involved and get their feet wet and not kind of be switching it up too often.
Yeah, because after this term is up, like, things are going to be back to normal, so all these meetings are going to be in person. Right now, everything's virtual. It's wonderful. You can do as many meetings as you want sitting on your couch, but once you start spending that $1.65 a litre, it's going to add up. So, anyway. Councillor Mackay.
I never thought I'd say this, but for committee of adjustment, I like the Zoom meeting. You don't have to take a shower. You don't, well, in my business, you should take a shower before you come.
You're just taking a coffee break from the barn.
That's right. And if I come to Cobden, it sounds funny, but you're going to lose 2.5 hours. And I have to drive here, drive home, and so I do like the Zoom meeting idea. Mm-hmm. And if we get the $125 a meeting, you owe us $2,500. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
No, this is an interesting one, and I don't have the experience of going through this yet, so I think this is the first time I've seen remuneration. When I look at the numbers, and I look across at Councillor Olmsted because I know he likes numbers, but between the mayor and the deputy mayor, it's another $11,000 over a councillor's pay. So we're basically saying that the duties of the mayor and the deputy mayor represent another half member of council. And I think that's a pretty fair representation. Split between the two, it may have to change after we see how it works the first time, and that'll be the challenge of next council. The comment about making it fair and the distribution of responsibilities, and I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of those committee positions are paid, they receive a separate remuneration, right?
2 of them.
Yeah, so there is.
2, yes.
Yeah.
So I think the mayor will have the work cut out to make sure that that is fair. What I would, my position in terms of remuneration for extra work coming from our taxpayers, what I prefer to see is that we withdraw a certain portion from every member of council, put it in a pool, and if you earn it by sitting on committees or taking on those responsibilities for the more demanding jobs, you get it. We don't take more money out of the tax bill to represent for that. Does that make it clear? So if I subtract $2,000 from everybody, put in a pool, and that's how we remunerate people who do what we define as the most demanding job. If we were to go down that road, I'm not suggesting we do, I'm just saying I don't want to see an increase. Is that, I know the Reeve is looking at me like I'm crazy, so.
Yeah, and if I can help, if you look at the attachments where some people look like they're really low, however, they get per diems for everything they do. So if you, when the statement of council remuneration comes out, look across the county and you'll see mayors that make 18,000, but on the statement of council remuneration, they make 41,000. So it's a bit of a, it can also be a game and an administrative burden for Carmen to track everybody's meetings. So I think the remuneration strikes a fair balance and with a commitment that you've all said about sharing the workload in terms of the other stuff that needs to get done.
Councillor Mackay and then Councillor McLaughlin, and then we're going to have a vote.
I agree with everything people have said except for Neil. You're not getting no money out of me to give it to someone else.
He wants your
Forget that
share.
idea. Thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, I guess I've been around, I've been both ways. When I first started, you got paid by the meeting, which, okay, I'm new and paid by the meeting. The problem there was you had one counselor making twice as much as another counselor because he was sitting on every meeting he could possibly sit on and put in. And that's why it was decided to go stop that. So, I agree with that part, because once you start paying, you get compensation, then it changes so much between one counselor's salary and another counselor. And when I would say anything, you said, well, I work a lot more. Well, I guess you did. And I wouldn't say you didn't, because obviously you must have, because you got a lot more, you got a lot more money. And money is not the main, right now, there's not enough money. It's plain isn't. So that is the reason it was changed. I was just going to give you the history of the reasoning behind it. And I like this way because I think it's a fair way. And if we rotate it, then I have no problems whatsoever with it. And that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, as promised, we will have a vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And there'll be a 5-minute break. Chair needs a break. Chair needs a break. Thank you. We're back. We're moving on to 6.3, Whitewater, Ontario proposal. Recommendation that the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region receive this report for information purposes as it relates to Whitewater, Ontario's proposal to provide public access to the Whitewater portion of the Ottawa River using an unopened road allowance. Motion and a seconder, please. Councillor Mackay. Councillor Olmsted. Let's go to Rob, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the report recommendation is for information purposes. So if that is the only recommendation that's dealt with, then the matter will be resolved in terms of the status quo. So this discussion in terms of Whitewater access started at, as you know, probably as an issue in the last municipal election, and then as part of the strategic plan looking at just generally access, safe access to water, not just Whitewater. So Whitewater, Ontario wrote us as part of that public consultation back in November 2019, suggesting they'd be looking to be a partner in terms of as the township looked at that issue. And then actually submitted a proposal to council back in June 2021 about partnering with the township to use an unopened road allowance kind of like across from McCoy Road to provide access to the river. I did an interim report in July, basically asking for more time to look at all options. We did look at some of the options back then, but also the direction was to look at existing property owners about access. And in December of last year, Wilderness Tours came to council to confirm an announcement they had made publicly that they were just going to institute a simple check-in procedure for takeout access and would no longer be charging. So due to the direction to report back to council once some of that consultation occurred, I confirmed with Wilderness Tours and with Whitewater, Ontario, and Whitewater, Ontario confirmed that they still wanted to proceed with their proposal. So staff are presenting, as I said, there's 5 options. The do-nothing approach is basically that the status quo would continue, and that is that Wilderness Tours has confirmed that they're not charging for takeout access for next year, that they would simply require check-in. So should council do nothing else, that would be what would kind of occur for next year. There is a supplemental draft motion here. Should council want to kind of formalize that a little bit more with the private owners that have been in the township for decades and that are known to us and have been operating for a number of years, then we could pass this motion if it was moved and seconded to enter into negotiations to formalize that, because there have been some disagreements over time. So such an agreement would look at how kind of issues of concern are dealt with, but to confirm continued public access. Options 2, 3, and 4 are not recommended at this time. So the unopened road allowance is there. We don't necessarily have to open it. We could stop it up and close it or sell it, and somebody else could do with it as they may, including providing access to the public. Or alternatively, the township could look at opening up that access point on our own, but I do note that there'd be significant cost to do so. Your 5th option, which is why this was all started, was Whitewater, Ontario's proposal to do open the unopened road allowance. And as I mentioned in my earlier report, there are some issues and risks and liabilities we want to make sure that should council go down that road to explore it further, that there be just some additional due diligence. So what I'm proposing here is a memorandum, should council go down that road, that it's not they start cutting down trees next spring, that it would be an MOU, so a memorandum of understanding that says, yes, we'll keep looking at this with you, but there's some preconditions that are necessary before anything happens. And that MOU would be enforced for 2 years to see if Whitewater, Ontario could meet those requirements. So one of that would be the necessary funding. So starting with about $150,000, we think that it'd be close to $1 million to do the necessary work to open that unopened road allowance. So we want to make sure that whoever, if we were to partner with somebody, that they would have the means to be able to fundraise those funds, and $150,000 is a starting point. The other one is there's some concerns about site plan and engineering and making sure that should it be opened, that it be done right, that it's fenced in terms of to ensure that it's contained, where the parking is going to be, where's the access egress. We think there's concerns in terms of access at the river point, so how that would be engineered. So there'd have to be some detailed engineering and site plan work that would need to be confirmed before proceeding. In addition, there's some insurance and risk mitigation issues. We would be opening access to a whitewater portion of the water, so we would want assurances that that is safe to do so and that there's risk mitigation planning and that there's also the necessary insurance coverage and that that would be additionally reviewed by legal counsel and our insurer. And secondly, it's great partnering with somebody, but partnering with somebody means we're partnering with somebody and we would want them to do all of what they want to do. So we would require some sort of operating plan that would show how they would do that, how they would open it up, maintain it, and operate it. So when is it gated? When is it operating? Who gets to access it? All that would need to be clearly identified as part of this MOU over a 2-year period before the township would enter into any formal agreement or do anything formally. So it basically ensures that should council decide to explore this further, there's some prerequisites and some homework that gets done before we even enter into anything more formal. So in terms of risk, liability, work for staff, the do-nothing approach does not open any additional risk. The unopened road allowance stays the way it is. We rely on private interests to provide that access. Should you want to formalize that a little bit more, we could enter into some sort of tripartite agreement with the two providers to do that. Should you wish, alternatively, to continue looking at the Whitewater, Ontario proposal, what staff are recommending is an MOU that ensures that a bunch of things are resolved and looked at and confirmed before anything formal occurs. So we feel that that kind of covers all the bases in terms of what the options are, and depending on the option provides opportunities for the township to ensure that risks and liabilities and operational considerations are properly addressed in very formal ways before proceeding. So that's an overview. If there's any questions on either of on any of these options, I'd be happy to take them.
Councillor Olmsted.
Yeah, so just a question for clarification purposes. And forgive me, I read so many emails and letters, and I was part of Whitewater, Ontario's presentations. I did receive, I think it was twice they presented to us. So this is just for takeout, right? So the road allowance would be opened for a takeout. So what about the put-in? Is there a public access for a put-in? Like does the township own land for a proper put-in?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I did ask that question. And my understanding is put-in access is provided through one of the operator's lands, and that the only other public access that would be possible would be at McCoy Chute Road, but we haven't been asked to open McCoy Chute Road. So McCoy Chute Road, which is close to Powers Road, is a seasonal road, and from there, OWL has an access point off, so it's seasonally maintained. So it's an existing road, it's not as long. OWL and Wilderness Tours own land in the area, but we don't plow it in the winter. So my understanding is, but we haven't received any kind of request to open public access for put-in. I'm assuming people have access now using private interests for put-in access.
So, sorry if I may, same kind of question. So, is there some sort of agreement now with? You mentioned one of the companies for the put-in with either Whitewater, Ontario, or residents. I'm just trying to understand. I want to go I want to go kayaking.
Okay.
How do I go? Like I'm not a kayaker, so I don't know these things. So I understand that we want to open up a road allowance to take my kayak out. How do I get in there?
My understanding is there's a put-in on land owned by OWL off of McCoy Chute Road, and Wilderness Tours River Run would own other private lands that could be accessed for put-in, and those accessing the river would be using private land to access the river now. My understanding is, having visited the site off of McCoy Chute, although it's owned by Al, there is a Whitewater, Ontario sign there. But I'm not sure what how formal that agreement is or what that arrangement is between them. But yes, put-in access is through private property, I guess, is the short answer.
Okay, I've got some comments and questions later, but I'll leave the floor to there now. I want to get clarification on that. Thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. I'm not sure. That's McCoy Chute Road we're talking where I
Yes.
thought that was Curtis Trail.
No, it's a head up.
Okay, Curtis Trail's further up?
Yeah.
Because if you follow that road, and I have, and drive down to the end of that road, it goes to the river. And
Curtis
that's
Trail
where-
does, yes.
That's where they put in. There is access there to put in if you choose. It's at the end of an unopened road allowance, and I sure there's a house down there, is there not?
There's at least 2, maybe 3, but that's private. That's not municipal, unopened road allowance.
I think we need to get clarification, because my understanding that is a road allowance.
Not to my knowledge.
Well, not, and it's too bad that Lane wasn't here for clarification, because to me, Ivan, do you know?
So I can't confirm where people are actually putting their kayaks in the ground, in the water, but Curtis Trail is a privately held trail. It's not, there's no municipal road allowance there. McCoy Chute Trail that CAO Tremblay was referring to is in fact a road allowance that appears to be held by the township, and it goes all the way to the river's edge. McCoy Chute Trail.
Okay, I'm totally confused. I know where they put in, because they all use the owl, I'll refer to as owl put in. And you go up there in the summer and you can hardly find a spot to park, because I used to take the buses, and the buses had quite a job to try and maneuver around all these kayakers that were out
McCoy
there.
Chute you're referring to? McCoy Chute Road?
Yeah,
Or trail?
I guess that's off McCoy Chute Road. And then I thought, and I was told that if you go McCoy Chute Road, where does it end? At the river. Okay. And is there a house just before the river?
There is a cottage to the right, on McCoy Chute. So McCoy Chute is actually on a lot or a concession line. And then Al's on the left, and then there's another property on the left as well. The Wilderness Tours has property, and there's like a cottage very close to the water's edge. So McCoy Chute, if you pull up Google Maps, we're up there. Are we on McCoy Chute? Oh, okay, sorry. So if McCoy Chute Trail is on an unopened road allowance, it's a seasonally maintained road. Al and Wilderness Tours own some land there, but Al's put in on Google Maps is in that area, so which is kind of across from Powers Road.
Okay, if I may I go ahead? Because my understanding is, and I've talked to a lot of people, because I've done a lot of diving into this thing, and I know a lot of these people. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure I got a phone call from the gentleman that, is that a year-round house, or is it a cottage?
The road is seasonally maintained, not plowed in the winter. Because I've received a request to plow it and reiterated that it's a seasonally maintained road. So it's not plowed.
Sorry, so who's plowing it? If it's a full-time house, who's plowing it, and do they have the right to plow our road over a municipal road, and do they hold liability insurance to do so?
So my understanding is the home that was being stayed in is owned by family of Wilderness Tours, and we confirmed at the time whether we would plow it, and we confirmed no, that it's a seasonally maintained road, and any request to plow would have to come forward to council. So my understanding is, I don't believe it's plowed. I'd have to drive by, but I know when I asked Randy last year to go and have a look, it was not plowed. So when the request came, so they wondered why it wasn't plowed. It's just it's not. It's seasonally maintained. It's never been plowed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mackay.
I think, can we go ahead to number 5 and just vote on that? If it goes through, we don't have to do the rest. If it doesn't, we can do the rest.
I think there's more councillors that would like to speak on behalf of the other options.
It's up to you.
So the other two councillors yet have not had a chance to speak. So Councillor Jackson, you want to speak now?
Please, thank you. So I see a number of issues, and I've written them down so I don't forget. So once that road is open, the road allowance is open, we can't close it. It would be very difficult to close it. So we have to take into consideration a number of things. One, allowing Whitewater, Ontario to monitor it doesn't bode well with me for several reasons. Because that's what we would be doing, is handing over the rights to monitor what's going on. Sounds like a lot would be going on. Yearly access, anytime access, 24-hour access, and all of that. Whitewater would have no control over that. Any issues, Whitewater region is still liable. Whether or not Whitewater, Ontario holds insurance or not, as we all know, municipalities always get sued, and in the end, municipalities are typically the ones that end up with the dollar factor against them because apparently we have deep pockets. Accidents on the river could increase if we allow inflatables. Inflatables is a huge thing, and there was never inflatables brought up before. I mean, right from the time I started running for council back in 2014, it was always kayak access. Never have I ever heard of inflatable access until this came up the last time. Who is going to rescue if there are issues? Right now, with kayaking, typically it's not one person that goes out to kayak, it is a couple of people that go out and kayak. They don't typically go out alone as far as I understand. And as well, Wilderness Tours and Owl Rafting is on. They have a group, and there is a reason why they go out in a group of rafts so that they can protect each other. If something happens, they're there. There's always somebody there that comes along with the group to ensure that there's safety issues available. No one has addressed the issue of the steep embankment at the river. With all of the emails and the phone messages and the phone calls, not one person has said how they're going to address that. And that is a huge concern. If they want strictly the road allowance, then it's strictly at the end of the road allowance is a steep embankment. I had one gentleman say that he wanted to take his handicapped child. I don't know if he used handicapped, but it was basically saying, you know, how else am I going to get my child on the river? Well, and I didn't think of it at the time. I was at work. I answered the call by mistake. And wasn't going to get into a whole long argument on the phone while I was at work. But how is he going to get that child up the embankment or up the cliff and through? No one has consulted with M&R or MOE. What are their concerns? What about studies? Would they need to be done? If not, because it is a township property, taking advantage of that, where the two businesses have had to jump through hoops to get their approvals, when they got zoning approvals from Ross Township to do the takeouts, to do any buildings. They had to jump through hoops. Every time they go to change their use, they have to jump through hoops and do all these studies. There has been suggestions that Whitewater, Ontario will look after everything, road maintenance, garbage. What about washrooms, insurance? When they say that it needs to be long-term access, how do we know the volunteers of today will be there tomorrow? You know, we know the two businesses that are there today have been there for over 40 years. We know that they are upstanding in the community. We know they're going to continue. We know they have a replacement of their the owners. We know that in Wilderness Tours case, we know that Joel and Katie are looking at taking over. So there is hope for that company to move forward. We don't know how these volunteers that are coming forward, are they voted in? Do they live around here? Is it a board of directors? How is that going to happen if the board of directors live in Southern Ontario? Because it is Whitewater, Ontario. It is of Ontario. The mission of Whitewater, Ontario is interesting. So Whitewater, Ontario is a volunteer-driven organization uniting, supporting, and sustaining the inclusive development of the whitewater paddling community and resources. This is what I feel Wilderness Tours and Owl Rafting has done by allowing access to the water. Owl has allowed the access for the put-in. Wilderness Tours is allowing the access of the takeout. Wilderness Tours was not the one that put in force the cost of taking out and putting in. That was set by River Run many years ago. It was just a continuation when Wilderness Tours took over River Run. And that is something people forget. Do they have to be a member of Whitewater, Ontario to be able to access? Is it truly public? How are they going to manage that? Where do the funds come yearly? How are they going to depend on that? I think long-term is what we've got now, or what is being proposed through Wilderness Tours and Owl Rafting. I think it's very important that we support our business that have been paying taxes for a long period of time. Yes, people have moved here to be close to the whitewater. But yes, people, I've never heard of so many people all of a sudden having rafts in my life. I go on the Whitewater, Ontario website, and I encourage every councillor to do so. There is one picture of one raft, and it's a Wilderness Tours raft. All other pictures on Whitewater, Ontario are kayaks and a few canoes. They're not in the business of rafting, nor is any of their instructions, because they have courses, dealt directly with rafting. Also, all of the clubs that are part of their association are all kayak clubs, and a few are kayak and canoe clubs. Why are we entertaining inflatables? The ability to have inflatables is very concerning. The inflatables that are on the rapids now are commercial grade inflatables. We all know they can survive being bumped up against rocks, trampled on by numerous of people every year. Thousands of people go down and use those rafts every year. We know they're well cared for. We know that the people running it are safe. We can rely on them for services. We've entered into an agreement for emergency services when on Whitewater. Somebody has an accident on the river, they call 911. Who does the fire department call to help on the river? It's Wilderness Tours. We have to be respectful of that. We have to understand that Owl and Wilderness Tours have a great business where they have opened their arms to say we're allowing free access now, which I highly congratulate them both for doing. And I think we need to ride this out, see how it's going to run for a few years. If there's issues, we would say, please bring those issues to our council, to our staff. Let us know what those issues are to see if we can resolve them. And if not, later on, look at the public getting access to the road allowance. But to start, once you know, you cut a tree, it's gone. You cut access, it's gone. Are they going to be able to fulfill? They can say all they like they're going to fulfill, but they haven't put anything in writing to say what they're going to do. And yes, that takes time, but I would rather have a plan prepared, presented, the T's crossed, the I's dotted before I would vote in favor of allowing our road allowance to be opened up. So I would move that, I see my email blew up. I would move that Council of the Township of Whitewater Region direct Mayor, CIO, and Manager of Community Development to proceed with negotiations for an agreement with Wilderness Tours and Owl Rafting to confirm continued public access to the Whitewater portion of the Ottawa River.
Motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Olmsted. Okay, so now before we dive into this then, can Councillor Nicholson have a say? Yes. Councillor Nicholson, please. Yes. So you want to go to Councillor Olmsted first?
So I'm allowed to make comments here now?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Well, unlike probably anybody in this room, I've had a front row seat to the last 40 years of this development. I grew up in the Kerr line. So if you walk out of Owl Rafting's site and just come over the hill, I grew up there. So I had a front row seat to see the increased traffic and whatnot. I remember when Eric Lindros came down and Jean Chrétien went rafting, and so I saw it grow. So I just want to say, from that perspective, the township and the sport has grown and benefited greatly from the, I think it was 3, maybe 4 businesses that had started. There was a couple on the Quebec side, but now down to 2 businesses. Both sides have done a great job at canvassing and campaigning us, as we all know. I have a concern that we're talking about giving access to probably one of the most dangerous areas and dangerous sports in the world. And God love, I know most of the people that called me, and a lot of them spoke that they wanted it opened. I have good relationships with these guys, but that really does concern me that we're talking about opening a road allowance that ends up, I think it's about a 70-foot bluff at the end, and a sport that needs to be monitored. You know, we don't let kids swim at our lake without a lifeguard, yet we have, you know, world-class whitewater in our region. You know, if you can't get close to it, if you ever go past the Chenot Dam and see what in the spring what the water's like there, like there's a lot of power there. So I hesitate to want to open that for that reason. And when we open it, who's going to police it? You know, who's going to say, you know, kids can't go down there or can't? You know, I don't know how these guys operate now. I'm sure there's professional and championship kayakers will go with them, but I don't think at this point in time unfettered access is probably a good idea. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm not for more government. I'm not for more rules. I'm just not. I think, you know, I'm a biker as well, so, you know, rules fly out the window, as Charlene is as well. But I've been to Jamaica and Mexico and those places where, you know, there's hardly any rules, and bungee jump and stuff, where you see that, you know, the danger sometimes that these people are put in. And I'm not, at this point in time, I'm not comfortable with it. The last note on it, you know, we've said no to something like Garden Lake to open up, you know, public access to Garden Lake, but here we're comfortable opening up accessed, and it's probably because you guys have been inundated with calls, and I get that. There's a lot of pressure. I think we owe it to the companies that are involved and the region and the kayakers to work this out. You know, the township can be a mediator in it and help formulate a plan. And as Councillor Jackson said, you know what, if it's not working, you know, it didn't work for one side and worked for the other before. Well, now the one side has offered an olive branch and said, okay, the heck with everything. So, you know, the road is there to formulate a partnership. I think there's never been a better time to formulate that partnership than now. So I think we need to give that a chance. If that doesn't work, then we can go with the option of saying, okay, that didn't work, so we've got to go with a different option. Lastly, I'm not comfortable with having an agreement, or I guess no agreement for a put-in, but we're okay to formulate an agreement for a takeout. You know, so Whitewater, Ontario, I believe it's called, they're not okay to have an agreement, and that's why they want the road allowance open up, but it sounds like they have an agreement for a put-in. And I believe the argument is, what happens if the companies, you know, they dissipate or go away over the years? Well, you have an agreement for a put-in, so why is an agreement for a takeout not okay? You know, you've got one at the one end. Well, should you not have an agreement for a put-in and a takeout? In my opinion, so I don't think the option 5 is wholesome enough for me to okay it at this time, because it's not completed in my opinion. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. You're next.
I think I've said, you know, everything that I can say. I think liability is huge. I think the fact that we're, by going with the option with Whitewater, Ontario, we're relying on the volunteers of today. We don't know where they're going to be tomorrow. We know these businesses have been around for many, many years. As I said, they've been taxpayers, they have a commercial entity, and to have a commercial entity at both ends open up free access, to me, is basically unheard of. I think that's important. I think it's important to give that a try before, I'm not suggesting ever doing Whitewater, Ontario, but I'm saying this has opened up. This is an opportunity that we need to take advantage of for a few years, and not just 1 year and make it an election issue this year. Not just 1 year. It needs to be a few years that is done before allowing, we need to understand what the issues are. If somebody's having an issue, then tell them to bring it to council. Tell them to bring it to staff so they can bring it to council. But give this opportunity that has not been there a chance, is all I'm saying at this time. Don't jump in with both feet in hopes that because we've been inundated with emails, I don't want to do the squeaky wheel gets the grease like we did in Westmeath. I said it then, I'll say it again here. We haven't made this option yet available. It just opened January 1st, 2022. We're 2 months in. It's time to give it some time, let them work it out, and see how that works. If it doesn't work after a few years, then fine. We can look at it again, but I think they'll be satisfied. I am sure that a number of people that are emailing are only emailing without the thought of the cliff. I mean, I could have responded to the emails and said, okay, well, have you considered this? I'm not in the mood to argue with people, because the ones that, if they ask you your opinion, you say what the issues are that you have concern with, they get very angry. Very angry. They're not willing to listen, which is unfortunate, because they need to listen on behalf of the ratepayers of the Township of Whitewater Region, to say, okay, I understand that, let's give it a try. Let's give it a gung-ho try, see if it's going to work. A lot of the people are saying, you know, we're going to encourage tourism to come in. Well, unfortunately, you know, there's probably one or two businesses that will benefit from any tourism coming in, and it's unfortunate for this many years that we've had Whitewater activities on the Ottawa River, that there is no more development with regards to Whitewater businesses. So is there a kayak business that sells business? Is there a business that sells, you know, what they need on a daily basis that, you know, maybe they're going to need some piece. They lost their paddles, so they need a new paddle. Where did they go to that? They have to go back to Ottawa to do it. You know, there are some opportunities to be able to open up businesses in Forsters Falls and in Beachburg that are close by, Westmeath, La Paz. And I tell you, if this area was in the States, you would see a Whitewater business at every corner and all the way down the street, selling t-shirts, selling life jackets, selling helmets, selling everything to do with Whitewater sports. So I don't know how many businesses are going to be increased. Annie's Gas Bar, yes. The Shell, yes. Other than that, they're heading straight out, straight back to Ottawa or straight back to Toronto, wherever they're going. There's not many businesses. There's not many campgrounds that have overnight camping. A lot of the campgrounds that we have in this area are more seasonal campgrounds. I don't see that happening. So they're going to be camping at friends and family. How do we control the friends and family issue? How there's so many questions. And that is the biggest reason why I'm not in favor of it. There's just too many questions that go unanswered, and nobody has addressed that to me. Anybody that I've spoke to on the phone, when I brought up those issues, I was attacked, and they weren't willing to give those answers. So, you know what? Get your T's crossed, your I's dotted, get a question with MOE, MNR, talk to the planner, what needs to be done. Give us some assurances that this could be done. Give us some assurances that you're willing to put fences up, that you're willing to monitor it. However, you're willing to make sure that you're going to have a few kayaks on hand for safety throughout the day, and not to have to rely on OWL and Wilderness Tours to rescue during the day. They're running a business. You know, like, it's unfortunate that they haven't come to the table more prepared. It's all of this, yes, we will, but we're not told who's going to do that, how long they're going to do that for. Because I tell you, once it's opened up and they stop, we're responsible, and then it's on our taxpayers. So I think that's very important to remember. I just see way too many questions not answered. And if they want to come forward in a couple of years with those answers, because it's going to take a while, then fine. But not at this time. I'm sorry.
Okay, any other comments on this subject at this time? Okay, we had two hands up. It was actually Councillor Mackay first.
I don't mean to challenge Charlene. Actually, I do mean to challenge Charlene, but she's a bureaucrat, and that's what they do. They get scared. And as for the river, we're not the Coast Guard. If people go out there, Kolsky's lost people on the river. River Run probably lost people. That's just, if you're on that river, that's the chance you take, no matter where you get in or where you get out. So this is a new company. These are new people. I met with these guys.
It's not a company.
Okay, they're volunteers. I know volunteers can do a lot of stuff. 10 of us run a fair that has 10,000 people. 10 people with volunteers coming in on there. So don't tell me volunteers can't run anything. And more efficient than any government, I'll tell you that right now. Anyways, I think it's time to give these new guys a chance. And nobody talked to me about inflatables. They said kayaks. They want to get on there with kayaks. I think that little word was put in by Joe. No. Well, they never said one word about kayaks, about inflatables. Anyways, that's my view.
Councillor Nicholson.
Public access has been a big thing, an important issue that I've been a proponent for since I've been on council. I think we've done 3 delegations to the Provincial Minister of Environment for public access to the Ottawa River Provincial Park, which is landlocked along the river. We've advocated to make Westmeath Provincial Park more accessible for people to use of all different ages. And there, in this case, we've had a whole bunch of public interest, input, and even organization. And I don't think, going to what Councillor Olmsted and Councillor Jackson said, I don't think that we've had this much input into an agenda item since maybe the cenotaph on my part. I think I did receive more phone calls on that issue, but so we know that there is significant community interest, broader than community, and that's because of the valuable resource that we have in our own backyard. Now, the access that's been provided by the 2 private companies that exist right now is tremendously gracious, and it can't go without being recognized. They've offered this free of charge now since December, acknowledging the liability, the potential for theft, vandalism, and abuse, and they've faced that in the past. And I don't believe that they do this half-heartedly. I think they offer this support because they truly want to support the community. So it's like both Councillor Olmsted and Jackson have said, you don't want to dismiss that or fly in the face of the support of these 2 industries. So I've had a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, just like everybody else. I think I've done a couple of hours of a tour on site, climbed that area that has been referred to, and spent quite a bit of time on the phone with advocates for and against. And it led me to do some of my own research. And I wanted to know, how did other communities establish public access in their Whitewater? What are the risks? How did they assume them? How did they assess them? What were the impacts to the environment, on the economy, and on tourism? And could public access adversely affect our existing commercial operators? Because you don't want to bite the hand that literally feeds our tax collection. I've read studies that were done by Golden, BC, the town of Golden, BC. And their Whitewater River, Kicking Horse River, was shut down by CN, which blocked the access. They spent a lot of money doing assessments on how to reopen that access. And they had no say in it. It wasn't even their river, but everybody that used that river would come into their town. So it was an interesting perspective. Not exactly the same as ours. I read about Run of the River, which is a whitewater park in Maine. I've researched the Frank Slide Cascadia project, which is public access rehabilitation of a river in Alberta for whitewater use. Whitewater boating that is done in Ophelia State Park. I've looked at the American whitewatering advocacy and what they've done in the U.S. Most of their stuff has to do with hydro and hydro restricting access because of the danger around the dams, or they just don't want bodies on the property that they manage. I've looked at BC. So the province of BC actually has an adventure tourism policy where they grant access to companies to cross their crown land or use their crown land for a variety of adventure tourism, including whitewater. So I know it's possible for that to exist, although complex. I believe our situation has very unique aspects, and both Councillor Olmsted and Councillor Jackson articulated just a few of them that went through my head. But I think there are many examples out there that could offer us some insight to better inform our decision. There were two research papers I read, both American that studied the economic effect of river recreation on local economies. The cases all found that there was significant impact when especially a rural municipality opened up their river to public access. But they're studies, and they have to be taken into account from that perspective. There's also not a full endorsement of public access without constraint. There's areas that I need to better understand. What are the environmental impacts? Do we want to take out 66 feet of a swath of tree line as it goes to the water? I don't want to facilitate commercial access or erode existing business models. Can they secure the capital and the operating funds, and for how long? Public safety is a huge part, and that, Councillor Jackson touched on it. It's scary, and I don't want to be responsible for deaths that I could prevent. So it's important that we understand public safety and liability. And as it's been banged into my head about the municipal fault, we can be 1% at fault and still sued. And I need to know contingencies for abuse, vandalism, and theft. Those types of things are going to happen regardless if it's a private, public, or whatever. We need to have contingencies. I believe that based on the public input and just the information that I've studied personally, that I think we need to look at this in more detail. I think it's unfair in some ways for us to rely slowly on our private rafting companies. Public access is a public responsibility, and we don't have the money or the capacity to manage it, and I don't want to. We only have the land, can offer leadership, advocacy, and coordination. So I'm in favor of exploring this Whitewater proposal over a period of 2 years, trying to find out if they can suitably answer my questions in order to provide that public access that I believe is something I'd like to advocate for. And only after that's been satisfied would I want to entertain a vote on whether or not we would open up that road allowance. But I'm in support of giving them the chance to come to the table, hopefully with the inclusion of our private companies, to have that discussion, to do that debate, and to figure out if that's something feasible. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Rebrigger was first, then Councillor McLaughlin.
The motion that's on the table before us right now is option number 1, and I think that is something that we probably need to discuss and vote on option number 1 prior to bringing forward option number 5. So am I correct in that, Clerk? Yes, please. Okay. So at this time, then I guess if Councillor McLaughlin has anything to add to it, I know where I'm going with this, is I am in agreement with Councillor Nicholson. I'm looking at option number 5, but I just want to be sure that we're doing it correctly here. And I will keep my comments until we get to option number 5 at this time. Yes, for now, thank you.
Okay, so before we go any farther, I'm looking at the clerk and I'm looking at the CAO. Councillor Mackay was putting a motion on the floor, and then I said, well, we would wait and go to the other 2 councillors who hadn't spoke, but then Councillor Jackson put another motion on the floor. We didn't get to deal with the first motion that was started.
It didn't get seconded.
So it's mute then?
Yep, so the motion you have on the table is option 1.
I wanted
And
to
then once
clarify.
everybody has spoken to it, I think the comments have generally been related to the option 1. And then once you've disposed of that option, so should it carry, then you're done. But if it fails, then you could entertain other motions at that time.
I wanted to make sure we weren't in error before we
No,
proceed.
you're doing good.
Okay. So, yes, Councillor Jackson. I'm sorry, yes, Jackson.
As I said before, I'm not opposed to allowing the option 5 to have the opportunity. At this time, I think it's prudent upon us to enter into an agreement according to option number 1 for a period of time, whatever that period of time be, does not exclude option 5 to come back in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, whatever that time period we decide, to get their T's crossed, their I's dotted at that time. But if we vote for option 5, I just want to put it out there, and I've had no conversation with either of the businesses, but if we vote for option 5 without entering into an agreement for option 1, how long is it before they stop the access? That's not what we want to do. We want to continue that access going forward. But I tell you, if I was the business and council ignored that option to give it a gung-ho try, I don't know how long I would leave my public access for free with all the liability on me and all the maintenance on me open. So are we cutting off our noses is what I'm saying. We need to be clear that you pick the number of years. Councillor Nicholson has said 2 years, give them 2 years. I'm saying fine, enter into agreement for 2 years. Let it come back at that time. Enter into agreement for 3 years. Let it come back at that time. By then we'll know what the issues are with regards to this access and if there are any issues. But otherwise, I don't know. I think we're going down a wrong path from what we wanted to achieve here, is that we wanted to achieve public access. We've achieved that with both businesses allowing the public access for free. That's what they always wanted. They've got it now. I don't know. I would just hesitate. And like I said, I have not spoken to either of the businesses to say that, yes, they would close the access down for free or not, because they can change their mind. It's up to them. It's their business. But I know if it was me, I'd have a hard time with it. I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
I just have a question, whether this may clear up option 5 and option 1, and I'm the seconder of the motion. So would it be prudent to, in option 1, to include Whitewater, Ontario in that? So the motion would then read that Council of Township Whitewater Region direct the Mayor, CEO, and Manager of Community Development to proceed with negotiations for an agreement with Wilderness Tours, Owl Rafting, and Whitewater, Ontario to confirm continued public access to the Whitewater portion of Ottawa River. Would that clean up some of I mean, they're being involved in the negotiation.
If I may clarify, option 1 is really about using existing private access. Option 5 is about using our unopened road allowance. So you can negotiate. So option 1 is really about confirming. Technically, we don't have to be involved. It's just if what option 1 does is some certainty that public access will continue for a period of time. And yes, you can include Whitewater, Ontario, but option 1 is really about existing access points on private property. Option 5 is really about exploring, so Whitewater, Ontario having to do some due diligence before we even entertain whether or not we're going to proceed on the unopened road allowance that we own. So option 5 is about the unopened road allowance. Option 1 is about existing private accesses.
And I understand that, but why, in my opinion, why are we shutting the door on either Whitewater, Ontario or private business? If we truly want a solution to this, why don't we have them come together? And if they come to agreement, great. If they can't, so I would move to include Whitewater, Ontario in that first motion, because I think it would clear a lot of the language up.
No, it goes back to Charlene, right?
No, so that's an amendment to the motion by Jackson and Olmsted to add Whitewater, Ontario after owl rafting, I'm assuming. So the councillor would need a seconder for his amendment to that motion.
Okay, do we have a seconder? No. Okay, so we go back to Councillor McLaughlin. He must have had a hand up for a while.
Thank you, because I've had a lot of experience. I've watched a lot of this. I was at Lunch Spot for years, and that, when I say Lunch Spot, that's out where the Lorne is. That's where most of them want to kayak, and I've watched them, and it's amazing. And I think that is one thing I don't want to see stop, because these people are amazing. What they do, I'm going, okay, have at her, boys. I'm staying on ground. I want nothing to do with it. But as far as safety, I think you have to be an experienced, and I think people, anybody, any family is not going to send their child out there unless somebody's with them or they are experienced. There's all kinds of kayaking schools. That part doesn't bother me. There's two things that bother me. The first is, and like Councillor Nicholson says, I need to find out, I want the plan. I don't want have at her and away you go. I want a plan. I want 2 years. Bring it to me. Show me what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. But you haven't addressed the put in. You say, because we're on the same issue. And you can say, oh, well, that's not an issue right now, but it's private land. Well, we can't have private land. If we're going to have it on a takeout on municipal property, then to address the whole issue, and that's where I was starting, is there a way of getting in onto the river? Because if you got to get onto the river with private property, then coming out on an unopened road allowance is fine. But at some point, somebody's going to put a stop there. So if we were going to do it, we got to look at both ends of it, the put in and the takeout. Show me where I don't want this to go totally by the wayside. I'm like Councillor Jackson. I want to see. I'd like to see them, and I don't know how the agreement that's been proposed for the takeout, the free takeout. I'd take, because if you're going to answer my issues, it's going to take 2 or 3 years, because I want engineered drawings, and I probably want to know, what are you going to do? Like Councillor Jackson says, how are you going to deal with this drop-off? Show me what you're going to do. Bring it back to me with your proposal. Do you have financing? You know, that all has to be addressed. And it's going to take probably more than 2 years. Are you going to come up with the funds to do it? Because like somebody says, I would assume by the time you're finished with everything, it would be $1 million, because it's 2 kilometers. And I don't know where Councillor Mackay's coming from, because the first thing, and I talked to these guys, and I know them, well, we want to put our rafts in. Well, I'm going, that's an issue as well. There's so many issues before we decide. I agree with what Councillor Olmsted's trying to say. I don't know how to word it. I would like to personally see option 1, but not putting option 5 away. I want to explore it. I want them to come back. I really do, because I do understand what they want, and I understand that part of it. And also, I'd like to see something with the agreement that Wilderness Tours has brought forward for the free access. Well, can we get something that tells us exactly what's going to happen, who and what are going to be allowed to do it. There's just way too much stuff, and right at the moment, I'm going to go. I would love to see option 5. I don't want it to die. That obviously I don't want to see happen, because we've all yelled and screamed about growth and development, and if we put that to a stop, then in my mind, you're stopping growth and development, because how many people, and everybody knows these kayakers, and they bought property and they live here, and I think that needs to be addressed as well. But to say, okay, go ahead with option 5, no, there's too many unknowns. Come back with a total plan, costs, show me what's going to happen, give me some engineering, and because I have issues with parking, I have issues with trespassing, because to me, if you're going to do this, it's going to have to be fenced. What type of fence are you going to put up? I want to know. I want to know how you're going to address that access, that cliff. Because at one time, and correct me if my memory's wrong, but I thought the first proposal was to move over onto private property and go down to the river. That's what I was assuming. That was the first proposal that I ever heard. And I don't know if there's any other proposal come back, but now talking to these people, I understand they just want to use just the road access only. And that's fine, because the second, if they were going back onto private property, that don't make any sense. So that was definitely out. You couldn't do that, and I'd be totally against that. So I don't want to give them the rights to go ahead, but I want to let them come back, bring back a firm plan with, as Councillor Olmsted says, with some figures and a game plan, and show me exactly what you're doing and who's going to do it. Because for one thing for sure, we're not just going to let somebody in there with a backhoe. And I mean, I'm sure, Ivan, we have standards that we want as well. So I think there needs to be some more negotiations than just, okay, let's go. But also, I want to see, where does this, see this, like Councillor Jackson says, see how this option works. I listened to all the screaming and yelling in the last election and the shouting. I think we all did. And let's see where this part goes, but let's not close the door on option 5. I think that's where I want to go. I don't know how to put it in a motion. Maybe I can pass that one over to the CAO, could do some magic and amend some of it, because I want to see both things go ahead. But I want answers. And that's where I am, and I'll stop.
Thank you. CAO.
I think once you dispose of option 1, which really clearly speaks to confirming what has been said, the public access on private property, so you deal with that first, and should that pass to the councillor's question, then you could move another motion in terms of how you want to respond to Whitewater, Ontario. But first you have to deal with the motion that's on the table.
Yes, one more question.
For option 1, and I saw Ray Rager shake her head a number of times when Councillor McLaughlin, she's kind of like me, you see what's going on with your face and your actions. I get the frustration, but I want to be clear. I'm not shutting the door. So how do you combine 1 and 5? How do you combine that to make sure that when they do come with a plan, that they actually have a plan and not just a bunch of promises. You know, I want to see a plan of action. I want to see something, and that's why I'm suggesting for a period of time that we enter into an agreement for a period of time, 2, 3 years. I don't care, but it can't be just 1 year. 1 year isn't long enough, is what I'm suggesting. It has to be at least 2 years, if not 3. And like Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Olmsted, Councillor McLaughlin has said, it's going to take Whitewater, Ontario, at least that long to come up with all those solutions anyways. I think their thought is is both favorable, you know, like it is, but it's not there yet, is what I'm saying. So I think if we put a time period in place with option 1, I think that makes everybody satisfied. And I think it doesn't shut the door to the free public access that is being given right now. My fear, and I said it once before, is that if we shut that door, then there will be no free public access this summer. I don't know for sure or not. I have no idea. Or any access, right? So we want to be cognizant of that. And we want to make sure that when somebody comes forward with a suggestion, like Whitewater, Ontario is coming forward with this suggestion, that they are fully prepared. They're capable of answering all of our questions and satisfying all of these things. Once they're capable of doing that, then we can entertain their suggestion. But right now, I don't think they're ready for it, and we're not ready for it. So I don't want to close the door on the free access right now. And if somebody is in agreement with 2 or 3 years, then we can add that to the motion. I would add that and then see where it goes from there. And if that satisfies everybody, which I think it could, because we all know it's going to take some time for Whitewater, Ontario to cross those T's and dot those I's, to come up with a plan, to deal with our staff. It's not going to happen overnight, and certainly we don't want to close the door on the free access. So I think we're prudent with passing option 1 with a time period. It's not shutting the door for option 5. They can still go about talking to staff and allowing that. And do you add that to the motion? When I look at the CAO, do you add that to the motion that those talks continue? Or what? But I think there has to be a time period for option 1. And I think once all of those questions and answers and concerns are answered, then we would be prepared to enter into an agreement under option 5. But right now, it's going to take a long time to get there. I just don't want to shut the door right for what we have offered on the table right now, and I fear that could happen.
To the councillor's point, yes, you can amend, the mover and seconder can amend the motion to add a time frame to that motion, to add 2 to 3 years for that agreement. So if they both would agree, then they could use that as a friendly amendment. There was a delay in preparing this report of 3 months. I was asked to come back in December, and part of it was trying to get an understanding from both parties on where they stood. I do not feel that the parties agree the 1 and 5 should happen at the same time. I think private interests feel that the unopened road allowance should not be opened. And I'm not sure, because I've asked the question, I said, well, what happens if option 1 and 5 happen concurrently? And I think, so the report is positioned in a way based on the feedback we've received from both sides. And one has said, Whitewater, Ontario has said, no, we want to pursue the unopened road allowance. So option 5 allows 2 years through an MOU to confirm 5 elements. And option 1 confirms to continue working with the private landowners. So to the councillor's point, by amending it, you'd have that agreement in place for 2 to 3 years. But my understanding is the private interests do not want the unopened road allowance to be open. So while we would want to continue keeping it as an option, you would the unopened road allowance is there. So as long as you don't sell it, you will always have that as an option. But I think to think that 1 and 5 can happen at the same time, I'm not convinced that if you say to Whitewater, Ontario, no, we're not proceeding in any kind of fashion, that they would continue being there. And I'm not convinced that Wilderness Tours wants the unopened road allowance opened. Like, let's be honest that there's two sides to this, and they don't agree on how access should be provided. I think I think it's fair to say that one wants one thing and one wants the other. Yes, as a township, we would want both options available to us. The reality is they're likely not available to you. You probably at some point have to make a choice. But yes, definitely, if you want to put a time frame on option one, I think that is totally appropriate and would give everybody a sense of, hey, we're going to try this out and this is how long we're going to try it out for. I think that provides some additional clarity and great. But I don't think either side is supportive of the other option, or I would have brought this report in December.
Councillor Nicholson, you're next.
I appreciate your comments, CAO, because you just blew my thoughts out of the water. So in my perfect world, and maybe it's because I'm becoming a politician, I want, could we not do both options, right? Like, that's my bottom line. And I know that may not be welcomed, but maybe that's the intent we have to have, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I think we need to have we have to continue the partnership with our commercial enterprises. We can't dismiss them. But I am supportive of examining option 5. And option 5 is just an examination. There is no, I want a road open right now in option 5. It's put money on the table, come back within 2 years, and give us something we can vote on. So I'd love for both to be put on the table, and the way it is right now, we're going to end up voting on one, and then I'm assuming a second one will get proposed. But I just don't know how to do it. I don't have enough experience with this, but you can't add anything.
No, my understanding from speaking to the private interests is they don't want the one that I spoke to does not want. Has been clear. The Wilderness Tours does not want the adjoining unopened road allowance opened. So I'm not sure they will want to enter into an agreement while we enter into an MOU to build something right next door. Like based on the outreach I've done to both parties, that's why Whitewater, Ontario confirmed, despite it being free now, because 6 months ago it wasn't free, despite it being free, they want to proceed with their proposal. And I think private interests want to continue with their option and not charging. So, I mean, you could technically approve both option 1 and 5, and then we would go to both parties and say, do you want an MOU and do you want an agreement, and see which one holds. I don't think we would be any further ahead.
Okay, Councillor Jackson was next.
Just to be clear to everybody, I'm not being influenced by Wilderness Tours or owl rafting in any way. These are my concerns. These are concerns that I have personally right from the get-go. Yes, Mr. Kowalski has contacted me as he has contacted everybody else. Yes, that has happened. Yes, I've gone down to see the access point like everybody else. Right now, just got an email and says, I don't understand what public access is. Well, yeah, I do. I've worked in the municipal world for 26 years. I think I know what public access is. In any event, what I am saying is for now, this is the best option, and I agree with Councillor Nicholson, is that you don't want to shut the door in option 5. And I agree that maybe all parties along the way aren't going to be completely satisfied. And I don't know how you're ever going to satisfy everybody involved. As we all know, with regards to the cenotaph, you don't satisfy everybody, and the ones that support something don't come out of the woodwork until all the ones that complain about it come forward first, and then you voted. In this case, we've heard from one very select group, some of them not even live and pay taxes within Whitewater region. And I'm not saying to discount their comments at all, because they are coming here to do the Ottawa River, which they have access through Whitewater region, which is important to give them that access. What I'm suggesting is that at some point there has to be a way of working these both agreements out and to see if option 5 is even possible. Because right now, it's not possible. There's a lot of ifs, is what I'm saying. And I think if they satisfy those ifs in the future, it would be much better for everybody involved. I think it would be much better for those private businesses if they understand what is going to be done with that road allowance. Is there going to be fences? What are they going to look like? A complete plan like the CAO has put down, a complete plan of action. That is important. But right now, we have no plan of action, and we're not going to go anywhere. And it's becoming frustrating, this whole process. And like when Councillor Olmsted said, we haven't earned our money enough this couple of weeks, we're not earning our money tonight, that's for sure. We need to be open to all the options, and I think option 1 for now is the best option for us. It guarantees an access, whether other people deem it public or not. All you have to do is sign in. There's no cost to it. Anybody can do it. That is public. Just because it's private, it's still public. It's still public access. They're not restricting anybody. If they are restricting, what I'm saying is come forward and we can lay that out in agreement that if there are issues, that it's dealt with in a timely fashion. We need to understand what type of issues that would not allow somebody to continue their access through that private property. We need to understand from the private owner what those are and say, okay, yes, they didn't do or did do those issues, and yes, we agree they shouldn't have any more access. But it needs to be laid out. We need to understand exactly why. Some of these people are former employees of Wilderness Tours, and they have an axe to grind against Wilderness Tours and the owner, which is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate they don't open their minds, and that everybody open their minds to the fact that right now on the table, there is access. Tomorrow, after tonight's vote, not sure there is going to be free access to anybody, and that's certainly not going to be public access. I can't guarantee that, but I know if it was me, I'd be pissed off enough.
Reeve Regier.
Thank you. Well, there's the key word right there, because I take that as a threat. I would take that as a threat if I was a kayaker or a paddler. There's your threat. That's why I think this debate is where we have to go. I think we have to take a look. I appreciate and thank the private landowner for opening free access. There was a reason it was opened 6 months ago, because it wasn't free prior to that. I think it's because this has been coming down. That's why. But that's exactly what this is. It's their land. Private landowner. That's not public access. We're going by their rules. Anyone requesting free access to cross their land must sign in, must sign out. That's not public access. And I agree with Mr. Kowalski. As a private landowner, I too would want to know who's crossing my property and going off. That's just common sense and good business sense for anybody. So I agree with that. What happens to the disputes when they start arising between the landowner and the paddlers and kayakers? Who settles that? Who settles that if we go into an agreement here? Municipal staff? Councillors? The mayor? I don't want to go down that kettle of fish either. And you think that's not going to happen? It is going to happen. It's going to happen. There will be disputes. And who wins those disputes? And who loses those disputes? The individuals that will lose the disputes are the kayakers and the paddlers who really only want access. I look at Mr. Kowalski and Dirk and everyone down there. I mean, I definitely see where they're coming from. We also have, when we look around this township, do you know how many people have employed because Mr. Kowalski or Dirk, these were kids coming out of school, coming out of college, coming out of university, and took up shop here and made a living here in Whitewater region because of the river and because of them. They're still here. They're businesses. They're landowners. They've got families. They're here. So there's nothing we can take for granted here. I am not ever one that plays the election card. I could care less. I am telling you that as I'm sitting here, I could care less. We looked at this in the election, back in the last election. We were sitting here talking about it then. Here we are sitting here tonight talking about it again. I'll guarantee you, if we don't make a decision, we're going to be sitting here, not whoever, the next council, whoever that is going to be sitting here making another decision. And what is that decision going to be? It's still going to be access to a private landowner. I'm just struggling with it. I am not going to be in favor of item number 1. I will definitely be in favor of moving forward with item number 5. And if you look at it, they're not walking in here without nothing. They're going to come in, they're going to have funding. They're going to have site plans, all the things we've already discussed. We've got to have site plans, engineering demonstrated access, egress, parking, all of it. All of this has got to be determined, and we have 2 years. They will have 2 years to do this. So, I think moving forward in the future, I think public access is the only way we can go. We don't know where the Kowalskis or the Dirks or anybody else is going to be in one year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. But I can tell you a decision that we make, and if we make it with Ontario, Whitewater, Ontario, it will be for future generations from here on in. It will not be whoever comes in. Anyway, I've said enough. That's my say. I'm ready to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Need a motion to extend, please. Okay. Motion by Councillor Mackay, seconded by Councillor Olmsted. We'll extend the meeting for 1 hour. Okay, 5-minute break? 2-minute break? Okay. Thank you. We're back, and just for the record, none of this was discussed while we were on break. We all had different reasons for break, so we're back now, and Councillor Olmsted has the floor.
Yeah, sorry, and just last word from me, I think, on the subject, and the reason why I was trying the unicorn approach to option number 1 of bringing Whitewater, Ontario, I think it is, Whitewater, Ontario into that, I don't want to shut anybody out, and that was the purpose of that. So, Councillor Mackay, how long do you think it'd take to build that, open up that road allowance? Just as an example. Open it up.
Well, depends how many trees you have to take down, but it's supposed to be fairly flat.
So a couple of years?
Well, depends what are they doing? You're making a trail for a car trail or a truck trail, or what are they doing?
Okay,
you know?
so my point being, if we shut one of the parties out, I'm a business guy, you're kind of a business guy, the way business people think, if you shut me out and don't even let me into the discussion, and if it's going to take 2 years for the MOU to get put together, so now you have 2, maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years before the road allowance actually gets opened, or the access is actually finally opened. Am I, as a business owner, going to let people continue to come through my property at all? So for the people that think I'm against, not wanting public access, that's not it at all. I don't want to see for the next 2, 3, or 4 years that being taken away from them. We're going to get those calls too, right? We've got lots of calls this week. We're going to get calls to say, okay, now he's closed it all together and that kind of stuff. That's the reason. Please don't shake your head. I'm just explaining to you the reason why I was bringing forward, trying to bring the groups together, because I can tell you as a business owner, I can script the next couple of years for you if we don't even entertain option number 1. Thank you.
So we'll call for a vote.
If I may, Mayor, I would like a recorded vote on this subject, please. I think it's important enough that that the public is aware of it. So I will request a recorded vote. Thank you.
Okay. We'll proceed with the recorded vote, starting with the
Just the way it is. There's nothing added.
That's correct.
That's correct. It was tried, but it didn't get a seconder.
Okay. So recorded vote. The mover is. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Requester for the recorded vote first.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry. This reported purpose to provide. I'm sorry, I got the wrong one. Councillor Jackson, please.
No.
What? She moved it.
No.
Oh, who coasted? Yeah. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Reeve Regier. I'm here. Present. Go. Reeve
Okay.
Regier.
So I want to be very clear what I'm voting on, which is option number 1.
Do you want me to read it just to make sure?
I think so. I think we do need to hear it.
Okay, so that the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region direct the Mayor, CAO, and Manager of Community Development to proceed with negotiations for an agreement with Whitewater Tours and Owl Rafting to confirm continued public access, to the Whitewater portion of the river.
Okay. And I am not in favor.
No, okay. Yeah. Councillor Nicholson?
Oh, I think mover and seconder go first.
No.
Good, not in favor.
Councillor Olmsted?
In favor.
Councillor Jackson?
In favor.
Councillor McLaughlin?
I'd like some clarification first. Okay, if we turn this down.
Your mic and your mask.
I'm sorry, before I vote, I'm sorry, I need some clarification from the clerk. Okay, if we vote this and turn it down, At what point could we then, can Councillor Jackson's motion be put on the floor after? Yeah, I realize it has to.
It's on now.
This is,
That's what we're voting on is Councillor Jackson's motion.
it's not what I thought.
Option 1, yeah, which is,
Option 1 with the 2 years?
No.
there's
It
no
was-
time frame specified in the motion, but it's
Well, I
with
thought Councillor Jackson wanted to put a time frame in.
But nobody seconded that. It didn't really come to a
Oh,
fulsome
okay.
discussion, so we're voting on option 1 as it stands.
As it stands?
Yep.
I'll vote in favor of option 1.
And then, sorry, Councillor Mackay.
I'm voting against it, please.
And Mayor Moore.
Against.
So we have 3 to 4 in against.
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Yes, please, CAO.
So even though that motion failed, should no other motion come forward, the status quo remains, which is the private owners have decided to provide free access with check-in, but the township would not be involved in formalizing that in any way. That being said, now you can entertain option 5, which has been discussed, but it would require a mover and a seconder.
Councillor Mackay? You're making a motion to, okay, do we have a seconder? Seconder is Reeve Regier. Okay.
Do we have that recorded vote too?
No. We have to have a discussion now. And we start with you because you're the motioner, so you can go first, please.
I just think it's a good idea. I think these people, we got all these things to get their ducks in a row, and I think they're going to do a good job. The ones I've met, their president, up and coming people who live in our community, and not only these guys, a lot of people have asked me about road allowances and opening to the river, and they're all for it. These are guys my age that aren't going to kayak. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder would be Reeve Regier.
Okay, thank you. So moving forward, the only option is, the one I'm in favor of is option 5 of this signed memorandum of understanding between the municipality and Whitewater, Ontario. This will ensure a first step to securing confidence and longevity for generations of paddlers and kayakers who have the right to public access to the river for generations to come. I'm clear and I'm concise in my decision, not one that I have taken lightly. I have heard the pros, I've heard the cons. You think this is the first, that we've all heard from everyone in the last couple of days? No, this has been going on. We've heard it many, many times. So it is not a decision I'm taking lightly, but I think I just have to move forward, which would, I believe, is the betterment of this municipality for further growth, further economic development, and the future of further access to the river for all generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh. Okay, thank you. Councillor Nicholson?
I'd like to table an amendment to the motion.
Okay, proceed.
I'd like to take the contents of option 1 and add them to the current motion.
Ask the seconder if she would agree. Is that what we do?
No. I need a seconder or it doesn't fly.
I should just point out that would be reconsideration. You just voted on that. So, you just voted on it and voted
Can we
it
do
down.
that?
To put it into another motion would require reconsideration, unfortunately.
Okay.
However, if the councillor is trying to incorporate existing landowners and some sort of of consultation going forward, that would be a separate motion once you deal with option 5.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I understand that.
I understand.
Thank you.
So we don't need a seconder then because that is dead in the water. Anyone else?
Just, Mayor, I withdraw. That's,
You withdraw, okay. Anyone else? Seeing none? Oh, yes. Councillor Jackson, please.
Okay, after reviewing the report, I have a few concerns about this one as well. Just so you know, I have concerns all the time. I think it's being a treasurer and seeing all the ways that people use liability insurance against municipalities, and I think that's very important to note. I think some of I need to understand what is the difference between minutes of understanding and an agreement. If the CAO can address that, I would like to understand that a little bit better, because perhaps we should be entering into an agreement and not memorandum of understanding.
So an agreement would come once all these preconditions have been fulfilled. So what an MOU says is, yes, we agree to continue working with you, but these 5 prerequisites are required before we enter into a formal agreement. And those prerequisites are meant to confirm that they have the funding necessary, that they're talking about risk and mitigation, site plan and engineering, and that we include, so all those consultation pieces that have been, that due diligence piece. So the MOU just starts the conversation.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we were going down the right path and not that we should be entering into an agreement. So I would like to see in the et cetera part, is that fencing, appropriate fencing, be in there for sure. Add ability to finance to move forward. We need the plan in place before any works are completed, including any ability to access the property. In other words, just because council may or may not pass this one, I want to make sure that they understand they don't have the right to access. They can walk through there, but they don't have the right to create paths, to create, to cut down trees, brush trees, nothing. I want to make sure that that is fully understood. I will also want to a memorandum of understanding that no commercial business will be allowed to entertain on municipally owned property. What will happen if there is disputes? Because while Reeve Rager seems to think that the only disputes are going to come up when it was a private owner, there are still going to be disputes that come up when somebody else is running it. And those disputes could be with the private owners on either side. I'll be on one side, Wilderness Tours on the other side. There could be a number of disputes. So how are those going to be dealt with, and what are the consequences of those disputes? I want to make sure that Councillor Mackay understands that it is Whitewater, Ontario that the agreement or memorandum of understanding is with. It's not every person that he has spoken to as well. So it's not up to them to dictate what the issues are. We have to understand that it's Whitewater, Ontario. We need to understand how their group works. Do they have a yearly election? How long do they sit in terms? What is their guarantee moving forward? It is Ontario. We have to understand it is Ontario. I understand currently right now there are some people that are locally that are on the group as volunteers. I don't know if they sit as president, vice president, or whatever, but I want some assurances that whoever that is going to look after this memorandum of understanding. And it's not, if we're entering into the agreement with Whitewater, Ontario, I want the signing authorities of Whitewater, Ontario to be held responsible for the memorandum of understanding. If those people reside close by, great. But I would like to understand what happens if those people that sign it today are not there tomorrow. And that's my biggest concern. What happens? What are they going to do with the operating costs, such as garbage pickup, grading of the road, whatever? We need to understand, are they going to have washroom facilities available down there? And the biggest thing, I think they need to speak to MOE and M&R. What are their concerns? They need to bring those to the table before we enter into any kind of agreement, before we allow them to access the property, to create any sort of access to the river. That needs to be very clear and concise. Like I said, in option number 1, it was for a specific time period. Now, this, with the understanding that option 5 will come at some point in time, now we're working with that, option 5, or if it passes, I assume it did because our option 1 got voted down. But those are all the types of things that I would like to see in the memorandum of understanding so that we are satisfied as a township that our liability and our future costs for future generations is at a minimum. Can I just get direction from council to see if they agree, disagree? Is there something that I haven't included? Is there too much have I included? How do we go about that?
Councillor Nicholson?
I'm in support of your approach. I'd like to add to it. And I look to the CAO to confirm. I know we're talking not about the motion right now. We're talking about the background material that's supporting the motion, so whatever the technicality is. In terms of advice, in terms where they seek consultation, and we need to make sure that we understand that consultation. In addition to MOE and M&R, I'd like to include First Nations. Okay. I think we do need dispute management listed as one of the 6 items, because I think that's an important one and one we don't want to get drawn into. And I don't know if it needs to be included in the points, but in terms of my personal, when the proposal would come back to us at some point in time, if this motion is supported, I would really like to start considering the put-in. Like Councillor Olmsted articulated at the very beginning of the discussion tonight, it's great if we make all this work to have a takeout and then we lose the put-in. So I think we need to look at it holistically for access to the river. And that would, I don't know if it needs to be listed as an item, but I think it needs to be known as that will become a consideration.
So if I could just address the comments. So Whitewater, Ontario is incorporated. It's an entity, just like we're an entity. So when you enter with the agreement, you enter into that a memorandum of understanding with that entity, and they would be wholly responsible. The required studies, and I've confirmed this with Ivan, and the consultation with all groups, including Indigenous people, would happen as part of the site plan elements. So, and the engineering. So it's not just the studies that would be required, archaeological, the water, hydro-G, all those things would be required as part of the site plan process. So that incorporates that. And the operational plan would also address who has access, who doesn't have access. And we've noted that the commercial part of it and the inflatables. So all that due diligence, all that back and forth would happen over that 2-year period once we have an MOU, and they would have to address all those points through those bullets. So we're trying to deal with the operational concerns that have been addressed, the risk-related concerns that have been addressed, the engineering planning concerns that have been addressed, and the financial piece. So that 2-year period is to solve all that, and that would get rolled into an agreement once all that due diligence has happened. So just want to say those 5 prerequisites. And the other thing I should say is the MOU comes back to council. So if this motion gets passed, we go back to Whitewater, Ontario and say, we'll enter an MOU with you. By the way, our lawyer's going to draft it and you're going to pay for it. And it has to deal with all these issues, and then that MOU comes back to council to say, yeah, this meets. But all those points will have to be dealt with during that due diligence period and then rolled into an operational agreement that would happen if the project occurs. On the point about the put-in, that I would suggest that's a separate motion as a direction to staff to investigate put-in access, and because this is really dealing with the unopened road allowance and Whitewater, Ontario's desire to work with us on the unopened road allowance, just so we can keep this clear.
Okay.
Sorry, Mayor, do you want that motion now, or should we address this one first?
Yes, you have to deal with
Thank
5
you.
first.
So then where on the agenda will he come into play? Will his come up as a notice of motion then?
No, so you can entertain it once you deal with option 5, just like after you dealt with option 1, you dealt with option 5. You could
Okay.
deal with any other motions that come forward at that time after you deal with option 5.
Clear as mud. Thank you. Councillor Olmsted.
Yeah, at this point, I just have so many questions, as everybody does. I'm starting to write some down here, and I'm running out of paper. So I'd have to really have those questions answered before I'd be comfortable. And just some top of mind stuff, like there's lots of risks. Commercial operators, who's going to police commercial operators being in there? You've got to be there 7 days a week through the summer. Trespassing, policing, safety. Is it gated, not gated? Who's going to handle disputes, as the Reeve said? What happens if, you don't think of it a lot of times. What happens if Whitewater, Ontario dissolves? Then what? Look at the number of associations or companies dissolve in Ontario every year, and more of them dissolve than actually that are formed. So, I'd need concrete. I like looking at assets that are right in front of me. I know they're there, but with paper agreements and stuff, they're really hard to get a handle on. The transparent, environmental. What happens if owl sells? Which could happen as well. So what happens to the put-in then? So now we have a takeout, but we got no put-in. So I need all of those things answered, and I probably have 1,000 more in my head that, but I'd need those really addressed before I'd be comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay. Reeve Gear.
Just in addition to what Councillor Olmsted is just talking about here, I understand, I hear all of it. I'm thinking maybe our next step is to bring 1 or 2 representatives from Whitewater, Ontario here into this council chamber so we can discuss it, so you can have your questions answered before we move forward. You're shaking your head at me, Councillor Jackson? That would not be an option, or is that something we can't even entertain? I don't know.
I think we're directing staff to do that negotiation, and I guess once they enter into the memorandum of understanding, once they come with once they come with their ideas, then we'll have a better understanding of what those questions are, instead of, anticipating what the questions could be. These are issues, I think, that that we're trying to identify ahead of time that can be put in the memorandum of an understanding. And then once they put it to words, there may or may not be further questions with regards to what is in the words. But I think to bring them here and have another meeting about this issue again is the last thing I want to do. But I think we're directing staff to do this. And the memorandum of understanding will come back to council to vote on, and I think that's where there may or may not be further questions. I think that's the best time to have it here, and then they can be here to ask any questions, just like we have a zoning amendment. We have somebody here, whether it be a public meeting, I don't know. But I think that's the time to have it and allow staff to enter into those negotiations with some of these issues being brought forward to them at that time. That's why I was shaking my head.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. And I mean, if it is staff bringing them forward, they have all the concerns that we have all brought forward. That's fair. But I think then at that point in time, I am in full agreement that we bring them here and answer each and every question so we're clear. Thank you. And the only other thing I'm going to say before we go to a vote here, as I did with the first, I'm going to request a recorded vote when this discussion is complete. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, I think there's a pile of problems here, like what Councillor, but the first thing, like Councillor Nicholson says, if we don't have public access to put in, but it's like, if you can't put the thing in, why worry about taking it out? So I think the first thing that should have been done was show me where the public put-in is. And as you say now, it's private. We have no problems with it. Yeah, you have no problems today. What happens tomorrow? Because you can't tell the owner he can't sell it because we want to use it. We need to have public put-in before you have public takeout. And if you're going to have public takeout, you got to have engineered studies done. My biggest problem with this issue is it's only 66 feet. Okay? Has anybody ever been at the Owl Put-In to see the vehicles that are up there? And you're going to try and park this down there? Or have you ever gone into Lunch Spot and tried to get through? How is a emergency vehicle going to access this? And as Councillor Jackson says, how is it going to get to the river? They need these questions answered. And that was my biggest problem on the first vote. That's why I voted for it, because I need these things answered before you say, let them go. Okay? I need answers, and it takes 2 years, and I want engineered answers. I want studies done. I'm sure we're going to have to do environmental studies, archaeological studies, because you're going to be ripping up ground. Those things have to be done. And that, like, come back and show me what. And if those things aren't answered with a proper program or a work plan of, first off, I want public access to put in. You got to have public access. There's no use having one without the other. That just sounds like, okay, we can deal with this person. We can't deal with the other one. We need public access. Well, if you don't have public access, you don't need public takeout. You know, if I can't put it in, there's no reason for me to take it out. So we need to have both of those. We need the study. My biggest problem is emergency parking. I need to have a plan of parking. Well, these things all need to be answered. And that's why I think till I get those answers, I don't want it. There's not going to be a shovel. If I have any say, there will not be a shovel put in till I get answers. And not just somebody said, oh, we can do it. And like Councillor Jackson says, I don't know. They say 150,000. I don't think, because I think that's 2 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken, and not through easy entrance. If it had been an easy way to get there, it would have been there a long time ago, and there would have been development in there. That's my logic, anyway. You got to have those studies, but the most important thing, I think, is you got to have public put in more. If you can show me where the public put in is and show me how you're going to address not only the parking at the takeout, but also at the put in, because you got to be able to get the emergency vehicles through, and it's only 66 feet. So show me how you're going to do your magic. And that, I'll stop.
Okay, thank you. So if there's nothing else, we'll call for a recorded vote. Oh, Councillor Rumstead, and then we'll have a vote.
Sorry, just a question. This would be more for, I guess, if Lane or somebody was here, or maybe Ivan. Is this the only place that we can open up a road allowance? Like, is this the best? There's 3? And that's what I'm asking. So
this is the best for takeout. Sorry, my mic wasn't on.
Right. So there's no other option for takeout, but there is for put-in. Is that
true?
There's
no other option.
This is the only option to open up a road allowance for.
The only property the township owns.
For a road allowance, for an
at
unopened
that
road allowance.
particular takeout. Councillor McLaughlin has his hand up. He disagrees.
I do disagree because I'm pretty sure Dipper Road goes to the river.
What I understand, it's quite steep and it's really grows gruff. I don't know how much it would cost to actually open that. And I don't know what the shoreline's like. I have no idea. Because I've never been to it, and it's gated and they want you to get permission to cross, so.
I would just say that Whitewater, Ontario looked at options, I'm assuming, and this is the one that they looked at. There is a long unopened road allowance further down, closer to the park, but again, it's not this section of the rapids. So this is, I'm assuming, why Whitewater, Ontario is looking at this specific one for takeout access.
That help?
Okay, I guess we're going to vote on this anyway, but can we confirm that is, this is the only option of whatever, what road is this called again?
Ditburner? Oh, sorry, McCoy Road. McCoy Chute is further down next to Powers.
Right, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Well, one's in
a
Ross
rafter.
Township, one's in Westmeath Township.
Oh,
I guess
okay.
that's how they ended up with the name. At the time, it didn't make any difference. Yeah, there was no such thing as computers when they come up with these road names.
So it doesn't sound like I'm going to be able to get that answered, whether this is, I guess, the only option or the best option or what.
So I think Whitewater, Ontario is confirmed, and if you go back to the presentation, that this is the best option on public land in this specific part of the rapids. So there's a specific reason, and it's the Rocher Fendu Rapids section. French word for split rock. Split rock is what Rocher Fendu means. So it's the best option in this general location. So. And I know there's other unopened road allowances, but they don't all lead to certain rapids in certain locations, so.
And they not necessarily are the distance. They could be longer, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. Does
Okay.
that help answer?
Yeah, kind of, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, clerk? Oh, I said after him we would take a vote. Okay, go ahead. Councillor Nicholson, you have the floor.
I think I won for 3 on slipping in there. Anyway, it's a good point. I think Councillor Ormsted made about, could there be other options? And I think when we get to the point of discussing the put-in before midnight, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm hoping as part of this assessment we're going to get some of that feedback, right? So we're not just looking at why wasn't other places selected? And I would encourage that if we do end up forming some kind of team or, group that's going to help analyze this and prepare it to come to council, that kind of thoroughness would be done. Because I'm not going to zero in on one section without a little bit of context. I agree. So that's what I'm looking for in the finalist when it does come back to us. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Clerk, do the vote before somebody else puts their hand up. Call the vote. Reeve Rigier was the one that asked for a recorded vote.
Okay. Reeve Rigier? Or do you want to hear the recommendation? We're good.
I think
Option 5.
option 5, yeah, I think we should probably, it's important enough to hear it.
That the Council of Township of Whitewater Region direct the Mayor, CAO, and Manager of Community Development to proceed with negotiations with Whitewater, Ontario for a MOU for a potential access point on municipal unopened road allowance with the 5 prerequisites as outlined in the CAO's report of February 2022. Reeve Rigier.
No, hold on now. Was there not amendments to that? No. Withdrawn. Withdrawn? Okay, thank you. Just making sure.
In favor.
Okay. Councillor Nicholson.
In favor.
Councillor Olmsted.
Not in favor.
Councillor Jackson.
Not in favor.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Not in favor.
Councillor Mackay.
In favor.
And Mayor Moore.
In favor.
Okay, so it's carried 4-3.
So it's carried 4-3. Now, are we getting another recommendation then from Councillor Nicholson? Now would be the time?
Yes, Chair, if I could please make a motion.
Just to mention that we're running out of time, so I'll make it quick. We extended it for an hour. We got 15 minutes. Quick, we can do it.
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting.
Do we have a seconder? No, you don't need to extend. Don't need, okay.
Okay, all right. So I'd like to make a motion that the Council of Township Whitewater Region direct the Mayor, Manager, Community Development, CAO to investigate public put-in access with interested parties.
Okay, not going to list any locations, just with private parties, is that what you said? Interested parties, okay. So we need a seconder. Councillor McLaughlin, you seconded?
I do.
Thank you.
So it's public access to put in. That's correct? That's what the, yeah.
Okay, confirmed. Questions at this time? Seeing none, have a vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay.
We have to call.
Now, do we have to go back to the original?
Yeah.
So 6.3, we're going back to the original. Just, okay. Recommendation of the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region receive this report for information purposes as it relates to Whitewater, Ontario's proposal to provide public access to the Whitewater portion of the Ottawa River using an unopened road allowance. We have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Carried. Okay. Now, we're done with that. 6.3 is complete. Notice of motion. Does anyone have notice of motion? Show of hands. Seeing none. Thank you. Now we'll move on to 8.1, regular council. Recommendation of the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region approve the minutes of January 16, 2022. Oh, sorry. Did I say January? Okay. Township of Whitewater Region approve the minutes of February 16, 2022. Motion and a seconder, please. Councillor Mackay and Reeve Regier, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now we go on to 9.1, which is letters from Minister Rickford, and there's 2 or 3 of them there, and it has to do with fact sheets on moths, etc. And 9.2 is Whitewater Seniors Home Support. There's a letter from the Minister Chow for the townships joining him at AMO. And now we go to item 10, bylaws. We're doing 22-03-1482 as
82. We are not doing that.
we are not doing 22-03-1482 is not on the table at this time. So we were doing the next one, 22-03-1483 as amended. Motion and a seconder, please. Reeve Mackay and Councillor Reeve Regier. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Conformatory. Motion and a seconder.
It's all together.
Did I do them all together? I didn't name it. Okay. Okay. Previous. No closed session, and we are adjourned at 8:29. Thank you all very much. Long night.